Chapter 506. I've only been here for a week, and I've received thousands of complaints. Hundreds of scapegoats have been thrown in my classroom. Do you have any leads? Jacob's face twitched when Huaisher stared at him with narrowed eyes. Behind him, Lin 19 calmly took out a thick list of names from his pocket. He patted the list and grinned at Morgan. He wanted to show that they came prepared. Some people recognized Lin Sergio, but they didn't expect him to stand on the opposite side like Yuan. They couldn't help but stare at him angrily. Meanwhile, Lin 19 was hiding behind Huaisher, acting like an arrogant lackey who had achieved his goal. He was doing everything he could to provoke them. Harvesting waves of negative emotions, he felt more and more refreshed. No matter how small a mosquito was, it was still meat. Especially the resentment of a sublimator. It was a great supplement for a sublimator on the path of sin. It was a pity that the previous 9 waves of leaks had been cut off by Yuan. Otherwise, if he had seized the opportunity, he would have accurately pinpointed the boundary between making the other party feel uncomfortable and furious. Then, he would have grasped the weakness of the other party and harvested their resentment slowly and steadily. Wouldn't it be perfect? Jacob didn't speak, and neither did Huaisher. They just looked at him quietly. He came here today to ask for an explanation. If Jacob couldn't give him an explanation, he didn't mind getting it himself. Otherwise, people would think that he came to the ivory tower to be a prostitute. After a short moment of silence, Jacob looked at Huaisher in front of him and finally responded, "I'm not too sure either, but there might be some misunderstanding." Misunderstanding? Huaisher raised his eyebrows. Yes, misunderstanding. Jacob paused for a moment, took a breath, and continued, "I think it's better for students to solve their own problems, right?" Yuan Zhao was amused. Bullshit. Problems between students should be resolved by students? Then why were you blocking the way just now? Now, no matter how unwilling Jacob was, he had no choice but to take a step back under Huaisher's deterrence. He maintained a neutral attitude on the surface, and even gave a meaningful reminder. If the students in your classroom have any opinions about us, we are naturally willing to fight it out. However, as a teacher, if I were to get involved on impulse, I'm afraid that the outcome might not be what I want. Hearing that, the students of the Sea Fishing Club behind him stood out without his order. They all looked burly and energetic, as if they already had rich experience in this kind of door-to-door matters. On the other hand, Lin Sergio, who was standing behind Huaisher, didn't look like he could fight very well. The scene suddenly became bleak and desolate. Lin Sergio was also a little nervous. He raised his head and looked at Huaisher. What he meant was, "Teacher, you wouldn't be so heartless as to let me, a powerless teenager, fight with those animals, right? If they were playing dirty, he wouldn't be afraid, even if there were 10 times more of them. But if it was a face-to-face battle, how could a keyboard warrior like him win?" Huaisher pinched his chin and looked at the student in front of him. It wasn't impossible for him to feel it. "If that's the case, then you can take my place in this battle." He patted Lin Sergio's shoulder, indicating that he had been strengthened. "However, thinking that you haven't been in the school for long, I have a magic treasure that I can lend to you for today." As he spoke, he took out a metal bomb the size of a basketball and put it in little Sergio's arms. Holding such a bomb that was even bigger than his head, Lin Sergio's face turned green. He wondered if his teacher's disciple was like a magic treasure, a one-time use item that would be gone after it was used. Soon, he found that his teacher's face was even greener than his. He was scared out of his wits. Jacob was stunned for a long time and couldn't help but cough twice. "Teacher Huaisher, there's no need to use such a large-scale destructive weapon in a dispute between students. If something happens, that's true." Huaisher nodded and took the bomb back from Lin Sergio's hands. Before anyone could breathe a sigh of relief, they saw him pull out an invisible axe that was burning with raging flames from the void and put it in Lin Sergio's arms. "Then this is for you." Fierce killing intent and anger spread out from the transparent axe blade, stinging everyone's eyes. Lin Sergio subconsciously clenched his fist and immediately felt the snake transformation divine mark in his body, crazily absorbing the endless anger on the axe blade, and a ferocious shadow appeared behind him. It was an indescribable surprise. a border relic that was evaluated to be at least above grade A, and even vaguely had the characteristics of a stigmata relic, and the outline of a ghost appeared inside. Holding in his hand, a steady stream of inspiration and skills emerged in his mind, and in an instant he felt that he was omnipotent, and that everyone in front of him was like a chicken or a pottery dog, unable to withstand a single blow. But the moment he held the axe of anger, Lin Shurjo revealed an unconscious, ferocious smile in front of everyone, and his eyes were scarlet red. Oh, so strong. He couldn't help but say, "Teacher Huaishur, isn't this unfair?" Jacob frowned. Still not enough. Huaishur turned around and glanced at him unhappily, seemingly helpless. Fine, then let's change to another one. Without waiting for Lin Shurjo to object, he directly took the axe back. Then, the ground suddenly trembled, and a heavy and ferocious hammer fell from Huaishur's hands. The wolf beast emitted a scarlet light, and the tangible pain it emitted turned into an intangible weight that pressed down on everyone's hearts. As he gripped the handle of the hammer, a sickly red color appeared on the little hut's face, which quickly turned ashen. Violent Origin's substance erupted from his body as if in pain. It rose from his body, faintly interweaving into an incomplete halo of light. However, because of Lin Shurjo's own foundation, it couldn't completely manifest. Even so, Forested Cottage's shotgun had been transformed into a cannon. As if he could sense the boundless power contained within the hammer, Forested Cottage cheered. "Feel this." Just like before, he was interrupted before he could finish speaking. Or this time, without waiting for Jacob to speak, Huaishur shot out the spear of compassion in her hand. It pierced the ground with a refreshing floral fragrance, and in an instant, a cluster of pure white irises grew from the ground. Or this? A sinister sacrificial knife appeared in Huaishur's hand, and he casually nailed it to the door frame to the side. And this? Darkness emerged from the void, and amidst the high-pitched screeching of steel, a pitch-black chain burst forth with countless sparks, unfurling from the void. Of course, if you think it's strange, there's this. Finally, it was Huaishur who pulled out the sword of virtue from his chest. Bright flames rose from the blade, and the dazzling light seemed to contain a glorious hymn. Holding the blade in his hand, it was as if he was holding a crack that led to the sun, majestic and dignified, making it difficult for people to look directly at him. 5 relics from the border were placed in front of them, each one enough for anyone to massacre the fishing club from the inside to the outside. "Okay, you guys can choose." Huaishur spread out his hands magnanimously, like a doctor who tricked the neighborhood's silly children to choose a Pokemon. "Do you like this one that cuts you in half, pokes you in a rotten meat, burns you to ashes, or directly straps you to death? Or even more exciting, not even leaving a corpse behind? If you can't, you can choose one person. It doesn't matter what equipment you wear. Look at my student. He doesn't look like he can fight at all. I won't give him any relics from the border, just a small pistol." Huaishur's fingertips twirled the Lord of the Flies as he asked with a smile, "Don't say that I'm bullying you. Everyone's life and death is up to fate. How about it?" Mr. Huaishur, suppressing people with power is not the way to solve problems. Jacob's expression gradually turned ugly. Besides, even if we win with an external object, it's not much of a glory, right? Then what should we do? Huaishur was almost amused. He pointed at Lin Shurjo and said, "Anyway, there's only one person in the classical music classroom. What else do you want? Why don't you let him fight with his bare hands? He deserves to be beaten to death. What do you think?" Hearing the teacher's words, Lin Shurjo was so scared that his legs turned to jelly. His mind was full of scenarios where he would really be beaten to death here, and then the teacher would use this as a pretext to make a big deal out of it, and finally take advantage of the situation to set off a bloody storm in the ivory tower. And he would be the loser who died tragically at the beginning of the story. He pitted himself for being so attentive, but why did the teacher have no humanity at all? Then let me do it. Before Lin Shurjo could cry, and before Huaishur could take advantage of the situation to attack, a voice came from the side. It was Yuan, who had been silent until now. The girl in the gray skirt took a step forward and said with her head held high, "Let me represent the classical music classroom." While everyone was briefly stunned, she raised her hand to Yuan Zhao. Although Yuan Zhao was very reluctant, in the end, he took out a completed form from his pocket and handed it over. In the end, it was handed over to Huai Shi. "Although it's a bit late now, please consider my application as a teacher," the girl solemnly asked and handed in her application form in front of everyone. All the seals and procedures were complete, and all the procedures had been completed. As long as Huai Shi signed, she would be a member of the classical music classroom and spend 4 years in the ivory tower as Huai Shi's student. Or even longer. Huai Shi looked at the handwriting on the form and was silent for a long time. Then he raised his eyes and looked at her. "Are you sure?" "Yes." Yuan nodded solemnly. "What about your family? You don't object?" Huai Shi asked again. "You should be under a lot of pressure." "Second Grandpa has agreed." Yuan Zhao's voice came, full of hidden bitterness. His objection to the family's arrangement was not ordinary. The difference in treatment was too big. Why was he so strictly guarded against? But Yuan was not forbidden. Until yesterday, he knew that his family did not mean to arrange anything for Yuan. They really did not arrange anything. After knowing that Yuan wanted to chase stars, his family did not fly into a rage, but were moved to tears. Chase. She could chase anyone. My daughter has grown up, so she should be more lively. In college, she should learn something she is interested in and develop her hobby after school. I think classical music is good, much better than your fourth uncle who plays Suona all day long. As for Yuan Zhao, I heard that you wanted to skip class yesterday. Come here, die for me. No matter what, the Yuan clan's older generation's love and tolerance for their children was something that many other strict clans could not compare to. It was enough for Huai Shi to feel how heavy this trust was. He was silent for a moment and asked seriously, "Have you decided?" Yuan nodded again, without any hesitation. Then, Huai Shi took out a pen from his pocket and signed his name in the signature column. "Then, I accept your application as a teacher." Lin Shiju, next to them, was stunned. Incredible. No, why was it that they were all students, but why was the treatment so different? Why did he cry, make a fuss, and threaten to hang himself, but become happy and simple when it came to Yuan? Was the difference between a stinky man and a young lady so big? He did not dare to say anything, nor did he dare to ask. He could not immediately go to Southeast Asia to perform a surgery with local characteristics, so he could only silently feel jealous. He did not know why, but he suddenly felt that the days of being wronged like a little wife would be very long in the future. When Yuan stood in front of them again with the Shan Jun sword in her hand, everyone found that, after a circle, things had returned to the original track. It was just at this time, Yuan came to attack them more reasonably, without any worries, and even more straightforwardly. Nothing had changed at all. Jacob's face twitched, and he forced a smile. This is a bit against the rules. Then what is considered to be the rules? Huai Shi asked indifferently. Why is it that you are always reasonable? We can't let you take advantage of all the advantages, right? Or is it that the same thing is called pursuing a victory, but it is called making trouble for me? Since some people refuse a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit, why don't we ask the school administration to make a decision? Silence suddenly fell. Jacob's face became more and more unsightly. Why are you so aggressive, Mr. Huai Shi? He asked in a low voice. These students just made a small mistake. Do you really want to be so ruthless? He did not fly into a rage, as expected. Huai Shi smiled. Then, let's end the first thing here. Let's talk about the second thing. Jacob's heart jumped inexplicably. Chapter 507. It wasn't just Jacob. Morgan's group's eyelids were also twitching. They glanced to the side discreetly and stared at the student who had just rushed back. The student who had specifically gone to seek help from other teachers had rushed back. His face was pale, and he shook his head helplessly at Morgan. Other than Jacob, no one was willing to come. Morgan's heart sank. Then, it felt even colder, because Huai Shi looked over. I heard that there are many of my fans here. They should be the ones, right? Huai Shi asked warmly, but for some reason, they suddenly felt a chill run down their spines. They wanted to defend themselves, but what was there to defend themselves at this time? Weren't they secretly instigating this? Since they had already come to find them, what was the point of explaining? Thank you for your love. Huaisher smiled gently and took a step forward. Today, I'm here to hold a meet and greet for everyone. Bang! The entire club seemed to shake. They felt the power of the trampling. Under Huaisher's feet, the club's tiles cracked. After drilling through the cement surface, the footprints sank deep into the soil. He walked into the Purebloods Club in such a grand manner. Looking around at the exquisite decorations, he sighed. At this time, Jacob could no longer sit and watch Huaisher act so arrogantly. He angrily blocked his path and glared at him. Are you not going to give us any face at all? What else? Huaisher sneered. In the end, what does this have to do with you? Teacher, you think too highly of yourself, don't you think? In the end, there is no room for you to interfere. Jacob was furious. I'm the instructor here. Then you'll be in charge. Huaisher's expression instantly turned cold. Before he could react, he took another step forward, causing the entire club to shake again. Today, I brought my student here not to denounce him, but to tell him that justice is here, but it is not given by others. You have to take it for yourself. Huaisher stepped forward, pressing on step by step. Since he just said that the students should settle their own matters, then the dispute between teachers should be settled by the teachers. We have to show them how adults solve problems with their hands, not their mouths. He stared at the face in front of him and asked word by word. Other than your mouth, what else do you have to show? Jacob's face alternated between green and white. He subconsciously looked to his left and right, but he didn't see any of his colleagues coming over. At this point, how could he not understand what was going on? Perhaps he was the only one who came here today. However, after being forced to this point by Huaisher, how could he find a way out? All right, solve the problem, right? His face was ashen as he gritted his teeth. Then, as you wish. The entire club suddenly shook slightly again, and right in the center of the hall, a pure white field in space had unfolded. Countless blocks of color flipped and disappeared, finally converging into a green-gray slate, empty and quiet. In the ivory tower that represented the so-called classroom, a virtual classroom, the authority granted to the teachers by the Teaching and Research Office temporarily opened up a virtual space that existed in reality for teaching. It was very similar to the simulation in the Book of Destiny, but it was not as flexible as the simulation in the Book of Destiny. Because of its safety, it was used in most dangerous classes and teaching to avoid some tragic injuries that even the school doctor's office could not save. In this framework created by the creator, all those who entered would be temporarily transformed into a recording life form for simulation, so naturally, there was no need to worry about their lives. However, because the application process was too cumbersome and there was really no use for it in the classical music appreciation class, even though Huaisher had the authority, he was too lazy to activate and register it. This was his first time experiencing it, and it was very novel. He was like a bumpkin. What are you waiting for, Mr. Huaisher? Jacob pulled out 2 daggers from his waist and said coldly, "Let me see if you are as magical as that idiot Sasaki bragged." Calm down. Huaisher stood at the edge of the virtual classroom, but waved behind him, motioning the 2 students to come forward. After Lin Huaxia and Yuan Yuan came over, he looked at the faces of the 2 students, thought for a moment, and said seriously, "As a teacher, I have received the trust and expectations of you and your elders, but I am limited by my lack of knowledge. I don't know what to teach you, and I don't know if I can help you grow. From his point of view, I am not qualified as a teacher." Lin Shurjiu and Yuan Yuan opened their mouths to speak, but they saw Huaisher waving his hand, motioning them not to interrupt. Then Huaisher continued, "Next, it will be my first class for all of you. I hope that all of you will listen carefully. It would be great if you can learn something from it. If you can't learn it, don't worry. I can teach you again, okay?" Lin Shurjiu seemed to feel something and quickly nodded. Yuan Yuan still looked dignified and calm, and she just nodded seriously. They were all good students. Huaisher smiled and patted their heads. Then she took the Mountain Lord greatsword from Yuan Yuan's hand and said, "Let me borrow this for a while." Sensing the touch of others, the white tiger in the sword opened its eyes and roared angrily. But with a shake of Huaishi's wrist, the sword made a tame sound and became gentle like a kitten. After easily subduing Shan Jun, Huaishi placed the heavy sword on her shoulder and glanced at them one last time. Then, she turned around and walked into the empty classroom with a smile on her face. As he stepped in, his aura did not rise, and it even began to weaken rapidly. The originally vigorous origin form disappeared without a trace, and young Arbiter Ming's strange sacred mark did not appear at all. Under Huaishi's control, he was rapidly retreating. If it weren't for the calm smile on his face, the others would have thought that something had gone wrong, or that they had stepped into a trap. In just a few seconds, Huaishi fell from a level 3 sublimator to a blankboard. Without the help of the sacred mark, he was at most a novice sublimator who had gone through the second growth period. Facing Jacob's gloomy expression, Huaishi propped herself up with her sword and stretched her body. She stretched her neck and waist as if she was warming up to avoid cramps from the strenuous exercise that would follow. As an idol, I'm ashamed to say that I don't know how to sing, dance, or rap. Huaishi calmly held the sword hilt, tilted his head, and smiled at the students outside the field. So, for today's meeting, I'll show you a traditional performance. At that moment, Jacob finally couldn't stand Huaishi's humiliation anymore. He roared in anger, and the boiling origin form gathered in his eyes, bursting with a burst of green light. His whole body became illusory and ethereal, as if he would collapse in the air in an instant, but his face appeared to have the ferocious outline of a wolf. The soul of the sacred spirit awakened in his body, catalyzing the body, making his appearance gradually closer to the legendary coyote, the messenger of the Lord of all spirits. And he was already like smoke, instantly dissipating on the spot. In an instant, as the smoke suddenly closed, half of his body emerged from the void in front of Huaishi, and the dagger covered in frost in his hand stabbed towards Huaishi's neck. Huaishi still stood in the same place, motionless, as if he was still smiling at the audience outside the field. Next, I'll show you the best move of Jinling's Guillotine King. At this critical moment, the Mountain Lord broadsword in his hand suddenly flipped over. With a wave of his arm, it jumped up. The blade roared and suddenly stirred up layers of air, forming a pale, white tornado. The wind follows the tiger, the cloud follows the dragon. Now, the tiger's roar burst out on the blade together with the hurricane, giving the sword an almost unbelievable speed under the drummer's urging. Thunder and lightning flashed and disappeared. The tiger's roar slowly dissipated in the air, and a headless corpse fell from the smoke that suddenly exploded, and then the head that died before it could react. In the dead silence, only blood splashed in all directions, but under the hurricane urged by the blade, not a single drop fell on Huaishi's body. Ignoring the corpse at his feet, he raised his head and looked at Jacob, who appeared on the other side of the empty classroom again, and smiled. His fingers moved. He said, again. Jacob was stunned, and before he could wake up from the moment of death, he saw Huaishi had appeared in front of him. Then the high-pitched sound of the tiles being stepped on rang out, against that pair of cold eyes filled with mockery. It seemed to be saying, "If you don't come over, then I'll go over." Before he could react, the Mountain King roared again, and blood spurted out. Still decapitation. In the late scream, Huaishi calmly turned around and looked at the students on the sidelines. Did you see it clearly? The students in Forest Hut blankly shook their heads. Yuan seemed to be confused. She frowned and then shook her head. I didn't see the posture of the arm clearly. Don't look at the hand first, look at the foot. Huaishi reminded her. I'll show you again. This time I'll slow down. Pay attention to the rhythm. Between the second and third beat, after the 32nd note, there's actually a 64th note. In the teacher's smile, Yuan was stunned for a moment. She nodded hard and opened her eyes wide. Witnessing, this was the beginning of a nightmare. Until the 32nd minute, before Jacob completely collapsed, this tragic beheading nightmare had been repeated 244 times. Because Huaishi rested for 5 minutes in the middle. Without the stigmata, His body couldn't support such a high-intensity duel, which was also very reasonable. At first, Jacob would roar and scold, and then it turned into abuse and roaring. Several times in the middle, he wanted to bow his head or simply beg for mercy. But he didn't dare to cancel his virtual classroom, because at the moment of cancellation, he might really be beheaded by Huai. In the end, after repeated deaths and ravages, he fell into mechanical numbness. He couldn't speak anymore. During the whole process, Huai held the Mountain King and demonstrated a total of 61 sword executions from Dongxia, Yingzhou, Rome, and even America to his students. Among them, he explained the 6 most useful and simplest methods, repeatedly demonstrating until he could completely remember the most basic forest hut. By the time he remembered the last method of decapitation, the entire classroom had already turned into a sea of blood and corpses. Amidst the mournful crimson, hundreds of corpses of the same person were randomly piled up in a not-so-spacious space. There was almost no place to stand. In the terrible scene, the only spotless speaker, Huai, stepped on Jacob's shoulder and raised his head to emphasize for the last time. Remember, at this time, you have to step on the shoulder blade and then exert force downward with your hands, like this. As she spoke, Huai held the Mountain Lord greatsword with both hands and stabbed downwards. A crisp sound rang out, like a ripe melon falling off the tree. The body under his feet struggled in vain and stopped moving. Only a bloody ball-shaped object was left, slowly rolling on the ground under the slapping of the blade, and finally piling up with its peers. It formed a horrifying hill. Then, today's lesson will end here. Go back and practice on your own. I'll check later. Don't slack off. Huai calmly stepped out of the virtual classroom that was rapidly dissipating and collapsing. Jacob's body emerged from the collapsed virtual classroom and fell on his back like a walking corpse. His eyes were empty, and he didn't make any more sound. Huai didn't care about the movement behind him. He just raised his foot and rubbed the non-existent blood on the floor. Then, he turned around and smiled at Morgan, who was beside him, whose face was already pale. When a student makes a mistake, the teacher has to bear the responsibility. When the child breaks the law, the adult has to be educated. This is the same principle. When he passed by, Huai paused for a moment. He patted Morgan's neck and taught him earnestly. So, the lesson of this story is, children should study hard, understand? This was the only sentence Huai said to him from the beginning to the end. This was the end of this farce that would be engraved in the shadow of a lifetime. I hope that in the upcoming idol activities, everyone will continue to support me, as usual. Before he left, Huai said goodbye to the cute students in the club with a warm smile. Then, in the sharp sound of the ambulance in the school infirmary, he calmly waved his sleeves and left with his students. Of course, he didn't forget his bicycle parked in front of the door. Just like that, Huai's first fan meet and greet came to a successful end. Chapter 508. Thank you, Lu Qingji. For hours later, a strange rumor that had never been heard before spread in the teaching and research room. When the professors looked at each other, they were somewhat surprised and stunned. Many colleagues did not expect that the young man, who had been smiling for days, had such a side to him. They also did not expect that he would suddenly show his claws and teeth at this critical moment, not caring whether it would affect the teaching and research room's evaluation of him or the upcoming classroom selection. On this matter, the principal and vice principal kept strangely calm. They neither praised nor criticized him, as if they did not see it. Even after the school administration reported the complaint about the fishing club at the regular meeting, the vice principal was still expressionless. He just glanced at it and then looked away without interest. He only said to follow the rules. Then follow the rules. Due to the fierce conflict with his colleagues and the improper duel that was not approved by the school administration, Huai was given a demerit, a week's salary was deducted, and verbal criticism. Jacob was given a demerit, a week's salary was deducted, and he was allowed to leave the school for half a year. He was almost in a vegetative state. It would take at least 4 or 5 months to find a psychologist to reconstruct his personality, and it would be hard to say whether he would suffer from mental illnesses such as PTSD. To be safe, He would not be able to come back to work for a year. A year later, he might even scream when he saw the duck neck of Doomsday. This made the other teachers who pretended not to hear it secretly relieved. Fortunately, they still had some integrity and did not rush to get involved. Otherwise, they would be the ones on a long vacation. It was scary just thinking about it. His head was chopped off for half an hour. It was really tragic, but it was also really fierce. Although no one knew if the vice principal would take it out and heavily record it when the teaching and research room conducted the classroom qualification review. But now it seemed like the vice principal was handling it lightly. Big things were turned into small things into nothing, and everyone acted as if nothing had happened. After all, the inside story was clear to anyone with eyes. Huaishir was nothing more than a young man who acted a little fiercely, but didn't he also leave some leeway and a sense of propriety? If he really wanted to be severely punished, Huaishir would only be deducted half a year's salary and lose the qualification for classroom selection. But because of this, there would be many students who would have to withdraw from the school, and it might even cause a scandal. Why bother? So, let him be. With such tacit understanding, this page was happily turned over, and it could be considered as the beginning of a new chapter. After the meeting ended, Andrea stayed at the back and waited for Anton. "I thought you would fly into a rage today," the female professor asked with a faint smile. "Don't you care that Huaishir brought his old habits to the ivory tower?" "What nonsense are you talking about, Andrea? In the Russian Federation, even in school, if a real man encounters such slander, he will stand up and play the roulette game." Professor Anton glanced at his colleague in confusion. Besides, isn't he doing well? From the beginning to the end, he didn't rely on violence to do anything to the students. Instead, he beautifully taught the young people a profound lesson, didn't he? Then, Andrea remembered that this old man was from the Russian Federation. He was full of martial arts ethics. In the university, when everyone had nothing to do, fighting bare-chested in the snow could only be regarded as a fitness exercise. Why would he pay attention to this kind of small quarrel? But then again, for this old man, what kind of tragic result was considered violence? Don't get the point wrong, Andrea. Anton took a sip of the teddy bear coffee given to him by his granddaughter and shook his head. No matter how big the necessary violence is, it will never be too much, and unnecessary violence, no matter how small it is, should not be tolerated. If everything is solved by violence, everything will be messed up. But if there was no need for violence, then order would be non-existent. Although beheading someone for half an hour is a bit too much, but how can an old man like me, who can't even walk in the winter, compare to the spirit of the young people? Okay, no matter what you say, you are right. The female professor finally understood the cunning of this old man. She had never been able to out-talk him. That means I have a reason. Professor Anton smiled happily. In the following time, Huaishir returned to his quiet and peaceful daily life. For this kind of elective course, the arrangement of the ivory tower was quite free. There were 8 classes every Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday, and they were all in the afternoon. In other words, if he wanted to slack off, he had a lot of time. Basically, after every class, Huaishir could check the progress of the cabin in the forest and Yuan. As a member of the Lin family, Little 19 was particularly embarrassing in this regard, and there was basically no progress. On the one hand, he did not have any foundation in music theory, and, on the other hand, he was afraid of pain. His biggest wish was to be able to develop in a corner and then kill the enemy from a distance. With this kind of reincarnated old man as a student, Huaishir was somewhat helpless. He did not know what to teach. Fortunately, Lin 19 had brought with him a pile of cursing teaching materials and a secret instrument handed down in the family, which was equivalent to learning from a teacher. As long as Huaishir occasionally provided him with some crystallized source form condensed from negative emotions and incidentally taught him how to control and use it, he would be self-taught. As for this kind of stubborn person, Huaishir could not do anything about it. And Lin 19's mood was just as complicated. According to him, if Huaishir had taken the path of evil karma, he would have almost touched the edge of level 5 just by relying on those few weapons condensed from pure negative emotions. This was no longer a negative energy generator This was a negative energy nuclear power plant. Therefore, he often looked at Huaishir with a sense of helplessness and wished that he could drag Huaishir along with him to be a bad person. Huaishir could only politely decline. In contrast, Yuan Yuan's progress was quite gratifying. She had a firm grasp of the beheading technique that Huaishir had taught her. The price was that Yuan Zhao's neck was often swollen these 2 days, and she occasionally had to wear a brace. Huaishir really did not know what had happened, so he could only maintain sympathy and then increase his efforts to teach her all the lessons in 2 weeks. During this process, what made Huaishir even more happy was that Yuan Yuan herself also had very solid violin skills. When learning the performance method, there were no obstacles at all, and it was smooth all the way. In just a short week, she had a decent grasp of it. Her talent in the violin was already quite outstanding, and now under Huaishir's request, she changed her swordsmanship practice to violin performance every day, learning from the basics again. And after each classical music appreciation class, there would be additional tutoring and guidance. According to her growth rate, if Huaishir gritted his teeth and went to the Helm Music Association in the Abyss and got a few scores, she might have the foundation to become a disaster musician in 4 or 5 years. The Yuan family was quite generous at this time. Huaishir did not even have to open his mouth and directly collected all the violin-related Helm music on the market and sent them all to the ivory tower. One part was given to Yuan Yuan, and the other part was given to teacher Huaishir. He also gave her a set of horse breeding encyclopedias. His horse was too fat, and Yuan Yuan could not stand it anymore. After finally stopping Feng Shu's fat otaku plan, Yuan Yuan took the horse to her aunt's house every day to exercise, and she finally lost some weight recently. And as such uneventful days passed, Huaishir was surprised to find that young Master Ming's stigmata had changed. Even if it was only a little, her control of the afterimages was getting better and better, and the maximum distance of teleportation was not only increasing, but the preparation time was also slowly shortening. She had grown. Huaishir had not had time to implement his Abyss Swarm plan, but young Master Ming's destiny had already improved unknowingly. After thinking about it, in the end, he realized that teaching and educating people could also be counted as the growth of a child. With the students' further understanding and learning of classical music, Huaishir also felt that the almost immeasurable correction value was accumulating. Among them, Yuan Yuan alone contributed the majority. If he could successfully guide Yuan Yuan to become a calamity musician, then he would definitely be able to go further. If he could popularize the sword technique performance method, then he would definitely have a large amount of correction value to be earned. But the problem was that the threshold of the performance method was too high. And most of the calamity musicians were respected musicians, so why would they need to live a life of bloodshed? It could only be said that no one could become rich without a windfall. If he relied on this method to honestly teach and educate people, perhaps it would take 20 years for young Master Ming's destiny to be completely completed. So, he had to find a way in another place. Huaishir pinched his chin and looked at the Abyss Ecology class on the schedule that was gradually approaching day by day, revealing a smile. Whether or not he could make a fortune depended on this. He took out his mobile phone, opened the Metatron cube and the collection of sins, then opened the address book and flipped through the phone numbers inside. It was time to spend money. A week later, the Abyss Ecology class entered the Abyss Plant section as scheduled. It was 7:30 in the morning before the class started. According to the usual management, the vice principal had already arrived in the classroom in advance. The huge venue that was enough to accommodate an entire grade of students at the same time was still silent. Only a few students who arrived early got up and saluted. The vice principal calmly waved his hand, indicating that they should continue with their self-study and ignore him. After putting his things on the teaching assistant's seat, he lowered his head and began to grade the lesson plan in his hand. When the students who came in later passed by, their footsteps paused for a moment, bowed their heads, and greeted him in a low voice. This was not out of fear of his position, but out of respect for this teacher. Regardless of his personality, this vice principal's strict requirements for teaching quality had benefited countless people deeply. Moreover, his serious and dignified personality did not mean that he could not stand others' jokes. Although he did not respond to some cold jokes, he never showed his face to others because of his mood. He had never even used his authority to seek the slightest bit of benefit. When it came to his students, he never hid anything from them. Just this point alone was enough to earn the respect of others. If he was just a gloomy and mean man, how could he become the vice principal of the Ivory Tower? Chapter 509. In the administrative system of the Ivory Tower, in addition to only one principal, there were 3 permanent vice principals in charge of various aspects. One vice principal was in charge of the institutional operations of the Abyss and was often not in the school. Another vice principal was in charge of confidential projects and various research, and basically never appeared in public. Therefore, the only one who came out to take over the school's affairs and the management of the teaching and research room when the principal disappeared from time to time was Mr. Isaac, who never talked about his family background. If it weren't for him, the school's operation might not be as simple and efficient as it was today. What was even more surprising was that after dealing with those complicated affairs, he still had time to teach and lead students. He was simply full of energy. Like a clock, every minute was full of efficiency. There wasn't a single bit of waste. Just after he temporarily sorted out the reports in his hand, he finally raised his head and took a sip of water. There were still 15 minutes before class. Behind the seat, a bold student came up and asked, "Teacher Isaac, are you going to talk about botany today? It is said to be very complicated. Can the homework be less?" "I'm not the one who is going to talk about this. It depends on the arrangement of the assistant teacher." "Which assistant teacher?" The students wondered. Didn't Mr. Samuel go on vacation? Is it Mr. Dongxiang? It can't be the music teacher who is here to make up the numbers, right? The vice principal rarely turned back. He was still expressionless, but his expression became serious. There is no teacher here to make up the numbers. Those who can come here are all teachers who are recognized by the teaching and research room as having talent and can bear the responsibility of teaching. In any case, you have to respect your teachers. Several students were stunned and speechless, but they still asked boldly, "Didn't I hear that he is only 18 years old? He is younger than me. Isn't Martin only 13 years old?" The vice principal shook his head. The amount of knowledge can't be judged by age. Without real teaching, how can you measure whether a teacher is competent? This course is the most rigorous compulsory assessment. It is related to your life. No matter what, the school will not joke about this kind of thing. The topic ended here. Not long after, 10 minutes before class, Huaisher also came in from the door. In addition to the lesson plan, he was carrying a heavy suitcase in his hand. After seeing the vice principal, he came over to say hello. The vice principal was still indifferent. He raised his head and asked, "How are the preparations? After you revised it last time, I went back and revised it again. Part of the focus was placed at the front, and some content was added." Huaisher handed the lesson plan over. "Do you want to take a look at it again?" "No need." The vice principal shook his head and glanced at the box in his hand. "What's that?" Huaisher smiled. "Some plant specimens and some auxiliary props. After all, there are many growth details that cannot be shown in the simulation of the virtual classroom." The vice principal nodded and didn't ask any more questions. He just looked at Huaisher in front of him. Although he seemed a little unhappy, he didn't say anything in the end. In the end, he pointed to the podium. "Class is about to start. Teacher Huaisher," he said. "That place belongs to you now." Huaisher nodded. Before he left, he asked, "Mr. Isaac, do you have any experience that you can teach me? Do your best, but don't make a fool of yourself, and don't fail your duty," the cold man said calmly. The cold man calmly told him, "I hope you can successfully finish this class today, but I also hope you know that I will not tolerate any mistakes in class." "I understand." Huaisher smiled calmly. "They'll try not to give you a chance to be angry." After that, he picked up his suitcase, textbook, and lesson plan and walked to the podium. The moment Huaisher came to the podium, the originally quiet and noisy classroom suddenly became silent. All the new students in the first grade were now gathered in the huge lecture hall. They silently looked at the unfamiliar teacher in front of them, their eyes full of scrutiny and expectation. They were looking forward to him making a fool of himself, or to him smoothly finish the class. After waving to the students in the classical music classroom, Huaisher put down the suitcase, put the textbook and lesson plan on the table, and smiled at the students. "Hello, everyone. I'm Huaisher, the assistant lecturer for the next botany class. But this has nothing to do with who I am, so you don't need to care. Let's start the class simply and straightforwardly. Have you guys prepared for the lesson?" After receiving the response of most people, Huaisher nodded and opened the textbook. Teacher Isaac has already talked about the characteristics of most of the ecological systems in the abyss, so I won't go into detail here. Next, I will choose a few typical plants that are often seen in the abyss and focus on them. Please turn to page 64 of the textbook. He opened the suitcase next to him, took out a flower pot from it, and put it on the table. He sprinkled a seed in it and picked up the kettle to spray some blood. Just as the students were dumbfounded, a lush mimicry vine instantly grew along the frame and spontaneously preyed on the mosquitoes flying in the air. The botany class of the abyss began in this way. What surprised many people was that Huaisher didn't try to do anything. Instead, he explained the ecology, preferences, and associated environment of plants according to the curriculum. Although the order was a little messy and not according to species, there was no plant that he couldn't grow as long as it was mentioned in the textbook. It wasn't just the students. Even the assistant lecturers below had their eyes open today. With the complex collection of the entire Mount Tai behind him, Huaisher wouldn't be afraid of such a small formation staff. If he started to talk, he could talk for a month. After explaining one side from beginning to end, he could still talk about the subspecies for 2 months. As a result, Huaisher, a newcomer, was able to smoothly teach a 4-hour class. Every 45 minutes, there was a 10-minute question period. The various strange questions of the students didn't cause much trouble for Huaisher. There was no need to talk about what he knew. As for what he didn't know, he simply planted one on the spot for experiments. Even if he couldn't come to a conclusion for the time being, he could leave it as a research topic for the students of ecology. Throughout the whole process, even if the vice principal looked at it with his most demanding standards, he couldn't find any mistakes. For a moment, he didn't know whether to feel gratified or regretful. Therefore, he remained expressionless. Of course, if there were to be flaws, it wasn't that there weren't any. It was Huaisher's first time teaching such a big class. Obviously, he was inexperienced and had a poor sense of rhythm. He finished the 4-hour class in 3 hours. Although some of the knowledge points could be strengthened by reviewing homework after class, there was still a flaw that couldn't be avoided. He had to be reminded to pay attention in the future. After turning the last page of the lesson plan, Huaisher raised his head and looked at the hands of the clock. It was exactly 11 o'clock. "There's still an hour left," he sighed softly, closed the textbook, and put it aside. "I originally said that I would stay for 40 minutes. I didn't expect that I would still be inexperienced in teaching such a big class for the first time." Facing the blank gazes of the students, he took 2 sips of water. After moistening his throat, he showed a happy smile. "To be honest, the reason why I arranged it this way was because of my selfishness. It's coming, it's really coming." At the back of the lecture hall, Lin Sergio raised his eyes and sighed. According to his understanding of his teacher, how could he be honest and follow the prescribed order on this kind of thing? He would definitely find a way to stir up some trouble. Why would he follow the prescribed order and become a machine for studying? At the assistant's seat, the vice principal suddenly frowned. But he wasn't in a hurry to interrupt. After his lips moved, he pursed them again. It was just that his gaze became more and more harsh. He stared at the young man on the podium. He heard the calm voice from above. "In the ivory tower, the reason why the course of abyss ecology is so important is that I hope it could be of help to everyone when they're engaged in the exploration of the abyss in the future. No matter how bad it is, at least you won't die in vain in hell. Since Mr. Isaac trusts me so much and let me be the main lecturer of this section of botany, then I won't hide anything. I hope that the following things will be of some help to everyone in the future." He paused for a moment, looked up, and asked, "By the way, when I was teaching just now, you should have taken notes, right? I hope you still have an impression of the order of my lecture just now." With that, Huaisher reached out, took out an induction cooker from his box, and put it on the table. There was dead silence. A row of question marks appeared in the minds of the vice principal, the assistant lecturers, and the students below the podium. What the F*** are you doing? Then there was a pot, and then a portable oven, a set of kitchen utensils, a set of seasonings, a set of common alchemy tools, and 2 buckets of clean mineral water. As everyone knows, there are a total of 3 types of abyss plants. On the podium, Huaisher said in a loud voice, "These include edible, inedible, and edible after some processing." In a sea of question marks that were about to turn upside down, everyone widened their eyes in shock. They only saw Huaisher calmly and skillfully heating up the oil in the pot, picked up a knife, and chopped on the chopping board. Those that can be eaten directly have already been mentioned in the book. Those that can't be eaten but can be secretly fed to the enemy to eat will also be mentioned in the alchemy class. Next, I will mainly talk about those that can be eaten after some processing when necessary. Those are the ones that I specifically mentioned in the last part of the class just now. Huaisher grinned and revealed a smile. Among the plants that are commonly seen and easy to find in the abyss, there are a total of 41 types of food that can be safely eaten after processing. There are a total of 12 botany classes. I will try to finish teaching these things before the end of the botany class. Later, I will send you the detailed recipe and processing methods by email. You don't have to use your mobile phone to take pictures. Pay attention to the position of the knife and the method of removing the poison. Look carefully, learn well. Although as a teacher, although I don't want anything to happen to my students, if there really comes a day when death is unavoidable, I can at least guarantee that you will not starve to death. With that, the kitchen knife chopped down and cut off the tumor-like thing that resembled a human face on the vine. After skillfully removing the fascia that resembled flesh and blood, a palm-sized leaf fell into the boiling oil, letting out a pleasant scream and moan. Under the light of the fire, Huaisher's smile gradually turned sinister. Wisps of fragrance quickly spread as the spatula stirred the pot. In the front row, there was the sound of saliva swallowing. In shock, the students looked at each other and then could not help but take a deep breath. They saw hesitation in each other's eyes. Although the appearance was a little unsightly, it was actually quite fragrant. Should we eat some? Just like that, with the combination of a deep understanding of the abyss plant ecology, the survival wisdom of the archaeological team, and the profound skills of the infernal cooking demon, the first abyss cuisine classroom of the Ivory Tower was officially launched. Chapter 510. The course was a success, more successful than Huaisher had imagined. What he didn't expect was that, in addition to the classroom, this course had also caused an unexpected craze in the Ivory Tower. The development of hell was like a dark abyss hanging under a rope. Once you left the border, you would never know what was waiting for you below. No amount of preparation could be too much, and sometimes, even if you were fully prepared, you would still encounter unexpected situations. No matter how powerful a sublimator was, they were still humans in the end. Humans had weaknesses, and no matter how strong they would still have shortcomings. The only thing a sublimator was stronger than an ordinary person, other than having a soul and resistance to hell's corrosion, was the various abilities from the sacred mark. Even celestial genealogy sublimators, who specialized in the abyss, would often stumble in an inconspicuous small place when exploring. In some hells, when there was no light, everything would be swallowed up by the darkness and disappear. In some places, even the slightest bit of light or sound would attract unimaginably terrifying predators. In the ever-changing or eternally unchanging hell, if one wanted to survive longer and return victorious, one had to be extremely cautious. The experience gained through blood, sweat, and tears, as well as sufficient preparation, were the most important. Sometimes, strength was the last thing on the list. Under such circumstances, every explorer could be called a wilderness survival master, and they were filled with an instinctive desire for any skills that could help them survive better. For example, Huaisher's hell cooking class. The things in this class were not rare, and many of them were things that Huaishur had learned from the undead bird Lucian of the archaeological team. There was also a lot of research on the edible properties of abyss plants. Otherwise, it would be impossible for everyone to know what could be eaten. But the strangest thing was how to know which of the commonly seen plants in hell that were inedible could actually be eaten under necessary circumstances, as well as how to eat them without worry. For a long time, these things had been passed down among the explorers as tricks and secrets. They were not widely spread and made public, and sometimes they contradicted each other, and there were even some mistakes. What Huaishur did was just rely on his expertise in botany and hell cooking to distinguish and organize again. When it came to finding ingredients in the abyss, no one was better than the hell cooking demon. After combining the experience of the senior Lucian and the suggestions of the general of the Heavenly Dog Mountain, Longshan Fong, Huaishur came up with 41 ways to deal with it. If he really wanted to find more, he could definitely find more, safer, and even richer menus. But if he did that, it would be meaningless. It didn't require the skills of the culinary demon. Ordinary sublimators could understand and use it. If they didn't have any tools, they could even make a fire. It was a simple processing method. He didn't need uncommon materials. He only needed the most common plant species in each region, or even the kind that could grow quickly if he couldn't find them. The most important thing was that it was simple, convenient, and there would be no mistakes. He wouldn't kill himself while trying to survive. As for the taste and texture, he would have to wait a little. Therefore, it was no surprise that this thing tasted bad. After class, the group of students who had the courage to try were carried out with tears streaming down their faces, and their mouths were still talking nonsense. It seemed that the shock they received was not ordinary. Huaishur didn't expect that the vice principal didn't express any anger at him for taking the initiative to add private goods. He just looked deeply at Huaishur, turned around, and left. His expression was as expressionless as ever. It was impossible to tell whether he was happy or angry. But Huaishur always felt that he seemed to be angry all year round. He couldn't afford to offend him. Then, in the afternoon of that day, Huaishur's doorbell was about to explode with people ringing it. First, the students and instructors of the school's Hell walking tour and the Abyss Extreme Survival Club came to visit and invite him to a special class. Before he could finish, a few chefs from the cafeteria had already come to learn from each other, as if they wanted to join in. Not long after, a general from the Yingzhou came to the door and respectfully handed over his name card. He said that it was an order from senior brother Longshan Square that Mr. Huaishur was going to do something big and wanted him to be an assistant. He was even willing to serve tea and water. After that, the 4 registered cooking demons of the school came to the door together, including the White Jade Restaurant of Dongxia and the Holiday Cafe of America. Even the committee of Hell's Demon Chefs competition specially called. From the sound of it, one could feel that the people on the other side were laughing so hard that they couldn't close their legs. They said, "Mr. Huaishur, your idea is nice. Do it well, do it big, and vigorously promote the food culture of Hell among the young sublimators." After asking for Huaishur's recipe, they reminded Huaishur to hurry up and make a complete version. Then, they quickly upgraded Huaishur's Demon Chef's license by 1 star. He was a blank Demon Chef's, and he inexplicably became a 1-star one just like that. Although he didn't know what was going on, Huaishur couldn't refuse such benefits that were delivered to his door. In any case, he took the lead and contributed some of his ideas. The other official demon chefs and a few abyss explorers who came from all over the world began to brainstorm. In the end, even the archaeological team joined in the fun and sent a commissioner over. 2 weeks later, before this month's issue of the magazine Hell Survival Guide appeared, a temporary supplement was issued. It was an 800-page supplement called Have You Eaten?, which included 417 simple abyss dishes that wouldn't die from eating. On the title page, there was also a half-body portrait of Huaishur smiling foolishly, who asked him to be the first to take the lead, and his image was the best. It was said that the follow-up publication was also in the pipeline, and it had already been set as one of the teaching materials by many development and training organizations. And after evaluation, within the next 5 years, all the participants would be able to share the correction value of 0.03. The organizing committee of the Demon Chef competition also used this step to show their presence and open up a small, low-end market for the Hell's cooking Demon Chef skills outside the originally extremely high-end area. The follow-up business plan was carried out in an orderly manner, but this had nothing to do with Huai Shi. He was just the beginning, and it was already good enough that he was given the correction value. If there were manufacturers who valued his recipe and wanted to mass-produce it, he might be able to earn another sum of money. But for the time being, he didn't plan to pay attention to these things. For 2 weeks, he was running back and forth between his own classroom and the office that he had temporarily applied for from the school. He was so tired that he was about to die, but there was no delay in either. But the most important thing was that a month had passed since the start of the school year. The only official classroom was about to be filled, but there was no suspense. Apart from Huai Shi, who had done so many things after entering the school, who else had the ability to compete? For the first half of the month, he had kept a low profile. Then, he had suddenly flattened the Sea Fishing Club of the Howlers family, leaving an eternal shadow in the hearts of a group of young minds. He had even sent a teacher to Shambhala for treatment. In the next half of the month, not only had he made some achievements in the hands of the usually strict vice principal who disliked Huai Shi, but he had also advanced to a 1-star cooking demon, almost opening a new class in the Ivory Tower, and also made a great contribution to the development of Hell. Even the archaeological team was considering nominating Huai Shi for the Explorer of the Year selection this year. Although it was destined to be only a nomination was already very impressive. Did you not see what kind of animals were competing for the Explorer of the Year this year? Lucien, the archaeological expert who had just conquered Hell at a depth of 24 and successfully excavated the relics of authoritarianism from the Kingdom of Eternal Darkness. Suo Hanzhong, the legendary Lone Ranger who had revived the Sumerian lineage through the exploration of the Akkad Rainbow Gold ship. Robin Delenat, the archaeologist who had dedicated his life to the development of the Abyss and had now died in Hell. Even his natural enemy, Chuhai, who regularly threw out important papers and archaeological discoveries every year. Being able to bask in the glory of the big shots at the end of the list of 100 people was already giving you a lot of face. Under such circumstances, even if the people in the teaching and research office were all blind, there was no way they could bypass Huai Shi and give out the official classroom slots. Otherwise, there was no need for Huai Shi to be dissatisfied. The people who got the slots could consider resigning themselves. Everyone was a person who cared about their reputation. Why should they suffer such great shame for no reason? Moreover, the teaching and research office had never had any prejudice against Huai Shi. Therefore, after comparing the performance of several new teachers, they made the right choice without any surprise. This was simply not worthy of other people's surprise and admiration. In the face of absolute results, making such considerations did not even require a brain. As long as one's eyes were not blind, everyone knew who would end up in the end. During this process, a sad episode happened. The youngest 13-year-old scholar in history, registered as Mr. Martin Liquid, was eliminated in the first round by his own teacher. He did not even appear in the final round. After all, there was a difference in age. Huai Shi was an 18-year-old adult, and everyone could accept it. How many people could accept a 13-year-old child as their teacher? Even if the premise of age was ignored, Martin was not a very easy person to get along with, and few students could keep up with his thinking. It could only be said that this was the sadness that only geniuses could feel. Except for the other teachers, no one could understand his classes. His disdain for ignorance and his resistance to stupidity further reduced the number of students who were already scarce. In the end, even without other people's advice, he already knew that he did not have the talent to be a teacher at all. Or at least, he did not have it now. Therefore, when Huai Shi went on stage to receive the award, his eyes were full of grievance, anger, and stubbornness. It was shocking, and his eyes were red. Just as the colleagues in the teaching and research office applauded, Huai Shi held the trophy in his hand, turned around, and calmly walked down the stage. When he passed by Martin, he could not help but pause for a moment. He sympathetically patted the little boy's shoulder and softly comforted him. Looking at Martin's stubborn look, Huaisher could not help but sigh. He smiled and suggested, "Do you want to touch my trophy?" Chapter 511. In the end, Martin did not touch it. Not only did he not touch it, but he also ran away crying. It made Huaisher feel very embarrassed, as if she had bullied a child. God had taken pity on her. She had only wanted to comfort Martin. Why did this happen? The next step was to choose a fixed address for the classroom. Huaisher thought for a while and decided to move back to the original place and continue to be neighbors with the border law school. He did not know why, but among all the neighbors, he got along best with the border law professor. In just a few days, their relationship had become quite good. It could only be said that the fate between people had arrived. The professor even invited Huaisher to be his assistant several times. He said that after a few years of hard work, he would be able to get a few certificates and publish a few public papers, and he would become a well-deserved giant in the field of border law. Why did a talent like you go into art? Even at the celebration ceremony, the professor was still regretful. It's a loss for the law field. Do you want to consider a change of career? It's not too late now. It was already too late. Huaisher really did not want to deal with those more and more complicated clauses with more and more loopholes. He felt that if he mixed in, he would be a bug for a lifetime. He could only have a tactful meeting. He was very busy for the whole day. In addition to the necessary preparations and procedures, there was also the selection of the classroom design plan. On the day of the announcement, many people took the initiative to come to him. They were all students who were about to graduate from the construction engineering classroom. They submitted their own plans and applications, hoping that Huaisher could hand over the construction of the classroom, water and electricity, renovation, and other work to them. He did not need to spend money, praise, or owe them any favors. As long as he nodded, it did not matter if a few students paid for it. They even brought their own materials and design plans of higher specifications. The reason was that this was all based on credits, and it was not low. Due to the special nature of the ivory tower, it was difficult to prevent all kinds of accidental damage, including but not limited to fights between students, explosions due to various reasons, damage to various heavy weapons during fights between societies, and experimental accidents every now and then. Therefore, destruction and reconstruction were abnormally frequent. Except for a few main buildings that were fixed within the framework, the rest of the buildings were renovated every few months. Even in a place like the photography club, there would be all kinds of weird things in the darkroom where the photos were developed from time to time. As for the strange phenomena caused by origin substances, they were even more numerous. The little red shoes in the dance studio, the eighth step, and the mysterious footsteps in the bathroom were already used to it. In the face of such an inexplicable and confusing phenomenon, rather than wasting time and effort to solve it, it would be more cost-effective to tear it down and rebuild it. Therefore, the architecture students who graduated from the ivory tower were very familiar with all kinds of border construction and special fortification work. How could they not be familiar? The newcomers threw their books aside on the first day of class and followed the seniors to play with directional blasting. Every month, a few architecture-related classrooms would basically have a competition to decide the architectural style of the school and the division of everyone's territory for the next few months. Furthermore, in order to practice, this group of bored fellows even contracted the renovation work of all the public classrooms in the school. It was fast, it was good, and it wasn't even guaranteed to be repaired. Every year, they had a large budget that they couldn't even finish spending. After they finished building, they would use their own money to continue building. Every classroom and every specialization had different needs. The theoretical classes could be the same, but the practical classes were different. After doing this, even a pig that didn't know how to design would copy. There were only 1 or 2 official classrooms every year. If they could do this well, there would be 2 designers, 1 architecture scholar, 1 electrical engineering scholar, and the person in charge of the construction site. At least a dozen students would be able to graduate with the best grades. Their future achievements would be limitless. Huaisher had a headache for a few hours before he unfairly threw the dozen or so plans to Yuan to choose from. He then secretly snuck back home. This kind of thing wasn't worth worrying about. In any case, he was a person who had seen the world. In any case, no matter how well it was done, it wouldn't be as good as his own home. This could be seen from the fact that the teacher of the construction engineering classroom would sneak around his house every now and then. Occasionally, they would look in the direction of the stone marrow building, and their eyes would shine strangely, which made Huaisha feel uncomfortable. Feng Shu was so old. How could there be people who coveted his body? That was too cheap. Next time, if he didn't persuade them to leave, they would be kicked by horses when they went out in the middle of the night with that in mind. He returned home and saw Uncle Fong coming to greet him with a serious expression. This made him a little uneasy. "What's wrong?" "Young master, there's a guest waiting in the reception room." "Who?" Huaisha was puzzled. He was tired after a day. To be honest, he didn't want to see anyone. But since Feng Shu invited him in without his permission, it meant that the situation was special. Soon, he saw the uninvited guest in the lounge. An old monkey in a suit was lying on his sofa, holding the teapot and teacup with both feet and skillfully peeling the bananas with both hands. He was watching the swimsuit competition on TV. In the awkward silence, Huaisha's face twitched, and he asked tentatively, "Mr. Principal?" "Yes, it's me." The old monkey nodded happily, got up from the sofa, and looked at Huaisha. After walking around him twice, he patted his shoulder vigorously. "Not bad, not bad. Young man, you did well. You didn't waste my efforts to invite you to the school. Don't be proud and complacent. Do you understand?" In this way, Huaisha and his principal, under such strange circumstances, finally met for the first time. "Are you used to coming to the ivory tower? Do you have any difficulties at work?" "Young man, don't be too modest. You should be full of youthful energy and make good achievements." "Young man, do you have a girlfriend this year? Is there anything the school can help you with? How about we assign you a female secretary, a male and female combination?" "Oh yes, you have a female student. That girl is so serious that I have a headache just looking at her. Do young people like this nowadays?" "Huaisha, why don't you say anything?" In the silence, Huaisha blinked his eyes and saw the white bear on the sofa in front of him strangely turn into an innocent and curious seal. He wanted to pull out the hammer of pain and beat its brain out. "I say, Huaisha," the seal shook its head and sighed, and asked earnestly, "Do you have any complaint about me?" "No, no, of course not." Huaisha shook his head like a rattle drum and said sincerely, "I have no grudges with the principal. Why would I have any complaints about the principal? Why do you like to talk so much nonsense, you old bastard? You don't know if I have any grudges with you? Which one of the 50 diplomas transferred me here? You even made yourself look like this to tease me. Isn't it fun?" If it weren't for the fact that Huaisha knew that no matter what, in front of him was a fifth-order boss, he would have taken out his gun and pointed it at the old thing's head. No matter how he looked at it, it didn't seem like a good thing. "Oh, that's good." The principal patted his belly, and, after barking twice, said with relief, "I thought there was some misunderstanding between you and me, but it seems that I worried too much." "Yes, principal, you worried too much," Huaisha repeated, looking eagerly at the seal in front of him. The tea had been drunk and the words had been spoken. Why was it still here? A smile appeared on the seal's face. "Are you wondering why I haven't left yet?" "No. How could I?" Huaisha laughed guiltily. "I can't wait to welcome a person of virtue and prestige like the principal to my house. Why would I be in a hurry to drive the principal away?" "That's good." The seal nodded. "Then I'll sit here for a while." Huaisha tilted his head and picked up the teacup in front of him for the umpteenth time. "Why can't this old thing understand what I mean?" "Oh, I suddenly remember that I can't sit here anymore." The principal patted his head and suddenly turned into a black leopard. He got up from his sofa and seemed to be ready to leave. Huaisha was overjoyed, but he heard the principal say, "Okay, let's go out first. We'll talk on the way." "Go out." Huaisha was stunned. He had just returned home and hadn't even taken a shower. Why would he go out? "I'm not going anywhere today." "Don't you already have an official classroom? You can be considered a member of the teaching and research room, and you can be called an official employee of the ivory tower." The principal licked his paws and sighed. "In the past, you would be a reserve member of the Utopia, an official ascendant of the celestial genealogy. Not only that, I'm already an official member of the Utopia who has passed the Vientiane Heavenly Spheres assessment. Do I have to tell you all this? Before Huai Shi could criticize in his heart, he heard the latter half of the sentence. It's also time to see the Book of Destiny. What? His eyes widened. The Book of Destiny? Now, all of a sudden, the heavy news from the principal scared Huai Shi so much that he almost jumped up. Although he had deliberately wanted to join the teaching and research room and get a fixed classroom for this thing, he did not expect it to be so fast. He had originally wanted to take it slow. After a month, he would go to the library and pretend to ask casually, "I heard that the Book of Destiny is here. Can I be Kongi Kong?" However, as soon as he became an official member today, the principal came looking for him. It was so sudden. "Didn't Yi Su tell you?" The principal looked at him in confusion. "I thought that Blabbermouth would tell everyone." "He didn't tell you?" Huai Shi coughed for a long time and said seriously, "I didn't think of it, right? Then let's go." The principal said, "Now, why are you in such a hurry?" Huai Shi panicked, feeling that something was wrong. He was about to refuse, saying that he had not brushed his teeth, showered, or even bathed and changed his clothes. How could it be so abrupt to fast for 7 days? However, the principal swung his black tail. His vision blurred. He had already arrived at the huge square from his lounge. In front of him, under the distant lights, the huge library was pitch black. The lights had already been turned off and the doors were closed. And under but he was still sitting on the sofa of his house. He's here already. Chapter 512. In the silence, a gust of cold wind blew. Huai Shi looked at the headmaster next to him in confusion. The headmaster also laughed awkwardly. "I'll send it back to you later. I'm just afraid that you'll sit on the ground and feel cold." "Okay." Huai Shi hesitated for a long time, put down the teacup in his hand, and stood up with the headmaster. Stepping on the steps, the huge and heavy alchemy door opened in front of them. The relief sculpture of the snake-haired demoness on the bronze door glanced at them and quickly looked away. In the library lobby behind the door, a beam of dim yellow light shone down, illuminating the dignified old man behind the front desk. He stared indifferently at the visitors outside the door, his expression dignified without being angry. It was as if he was located in the center of the library, surrounded by layers of strict arrays. In the reflection of the light, he looked so mysterious and strange. He had the aura of a master. "Which expert is this?" Huai Shi was startled and humbly asked for guidance. "Don't think too much. He's the guard who was hired back to look after the library after retirement 2 years ago. He's already old and confused. He's still sleeping during work hours." The headmaster casually broke his illusion. "This place has a special design. That chair is the center of the hall. Even if you put a dog on it, you'll feel that it's handsome and dignified, like King Arthur." Well, he was indeed sleeping. Huai Shi mustered up the courage to look over, only to find that the old man's eyes were open when he slept. If you didn't look carefully, you wouldn't be able to tell. His saliva was dripping onto his beard, and he was snoring. Bang! A loud sound was heard. It was the headmaster who walked up, raised his front paw, and slammed it on the table. "Hey, stop sleeping. Did I pay you to sleep here? Get up." The sleeping old man raised his head in horror. His face quickly turned purple, and he almost had a heart attack. He hurriedly took out a medicine bottle from his pocket, took a few pills, and gasped for breath for a long time before he recovered. He didn't even bother to wipe his saliva. He almost died on the spot. When he put on his glasses and looked over, his originally nervous expression relaxed. "You scared me to death. I thought the vice principal came to check on us." "What's the matter, principal?" The Black Panther, who was squatting on the front desk, wagged its tail and licked its paws. "I'm here to bring the newcomer around and read some books. Open the door." The old man was taken aback and immediately became reluctant. "It's already so late. Can't we do it another day?" "Amazing. This is my school. This is my library. This is my books. Do I have to wait for another day to read them?" Black Panther raised his head and glanced at the slacking old man in front of him. He asked angrily, "Do you still want to work?" Being glared at, The old man shrunk his shoulders and immediately felt helpless. Feeling wronged, he said, all right, why are you so fierce?" As he spoke, he wiped off his saliva and slowly got up from the chair. He muttered something under his breath as he turned around and walked to the high wall behind him. It was only then that Huai sure noticed him. In the lobby at the entrance of the library, behind the front desk, there was a huge wall that was more than 10 meters high. It was engraved with solemn reliefs and countless complicated patterns. It turned out to be a door. That's right, there was a straight gap hanging down from the center of the steel wall. If one didn't look carefully with a magnifying glass, it would be difficult to notice the slender gap between the countless complicated patterns and reliefs. The entire wall was made up of 2 iron doors. Huaisher's hand of confinement could feel that the entire door was made of alloy. With such a huge structure and mass, it probably weighed thousands of tons. But just in front of the iron door, as the hunchbacked old man slowly raised his skinny left hand and pressed it on the door, a sharp sound burst forth. "Is this the F***King ordinary old man you're talking about? Principal, are you talking about? Such a heavy door. Even a tank's main cannon might not be able to blast it open. What kind of monsters are the guards of your school?" Huaisher was so scared that he sucked in a breath of cold air. But before he could finish sucking in a breath of cold air, he heard a cold electronic voice in the shrill alarm. "Fingerprint error." The old man was stunned. He took his hand back and pressed it again. "Fingerprint error." Huaisher, principal. In the silence, the old man turned around and smiled awkwardly. "Sorry, I remembered the wrong hand." He switched to his right hand. This time, there was no sharp sound. The door opened. It was as if the mass of thousands of tons didn't exist at all. Huaisher squatted at the door and looked carefully for a long time before he realized that this thing was fully automated for fingerprints. He looked at the door and then looked at the old man who stood in front of the door with his hands behind his back like a peerless expert. The person who guarded all the school's information and important files, and even the fragments of the heavenly state records, was actually such an old man, and it was a fingerprint lock. Can't you change the password for your house? What if this old man died one day? He scratched his head and felt that this ivory tower was going to be finished after he followed the principal into the door in a daze. He couldn't help but look back at the old man. The old man was still standing at the door. When he saw him looking back, he quickly raised his hand and waved to greet him with a fawning expression. "So, there really aren't any hidden experts in your school's library? How disappointing." At the door, there were densely packed bookshelves as far as the eye could see. Countless small mechanical arms slid quickly on the ceiling rails, organizing various large and small boxes, moving files and other things nimbly and placing them in the places where they should be. At the end of his line of sight, there were several separate doors. Through the glass windows, he could vaguely see countless huge units sinking in the cooling liquid, venting terrifying high heat. That was an exaggerated amount of data being transferred, written, and read at a rapid speed every second. The whole place didn't look like a library. It looked more like a workshop and engine room in a factory. The first floor is mainly the server of the ivory tower, the school's files, and many insignificant records. It's just SOSO, nothing to see. The Black Panther walked in front and skillfully found the elevator that led to the basement. He said excitedly, "Follow me. I'll bring you to see the treasures of the ivory tower." "So, is it really okay for you to be so casual? I've only been here for a month." But after he walked into the elevator, he heard the principal ask, "Is it the Dragon Gate trial in Dongxia or the Rashomon in Yingzhou?" Huaisher didn't understand. After the Black Panther stood up and pressed the elevator button, it suddenly transformed into an Australian desert red kangaroo with muscles all over its body. It looked back at him and explained the screening mechanism left behind by the heavenly state lineage. "Which one did you pass? Do you think I can't tell that you're an official member of celestial genealogy?" "You can tell." Huaisher was stunned. Of course, the people who pass the screening and those who don't are actually a little different. There will be some special changes in the person's temperament and the source substance. Simply put, it's an anti-counterfeiting sign. "So, which one did you pass?" "Principal, I'm very curious." There are many people who can pass those trials seriously these days. Huaisher thought about it and was prepared to tell the truth. After all, there was nothing to hide. The myriad heavenly sphere. The principal looked at Huaisher in surprise, but didn't say anything. What's wrong? Huaisher asked. No, I'm just lamenting that it's not easy for you. Among the remaining 12 trials in the present realm, the myriad heavenly sphere is the most troublesome one. It's not easy, but it's not difficult either. It's very torturous, and the criteria for passing varies from person to person. Moreover, Golden Dawn is still stirring up trouble inside. It was fine in the past. After all, everyone used to be colleagues in the utopia. There are many things that could be discussed. But recently, those guys haven't even replied to my messages. They seem to have a lot of opinions about the school. Do you have any leads? Huaisher's expression twitched, and he couldn't help but look away. I'm not sure about that either. That's true. No matter how I look at it, you don't look like a traitor sent by Golden Dawn, the kangaroo said casually while gnawing on a sugarcane that came out of nowhere. Huaisher suddenly became nervous. He was afraid that the principal would suddenly jump and strike him to death here. Looking at it this way, he seemed indeed a little like a spy sent by Golden Dawn. Then what did the principal mean by leading him here? Was he trying to lure him to expose himself? Or was it that the Ivory Tower and Golden Dawn actually had some kind of unspeakable and unknown friendship before, and they often communicated in secret and thought that he was sent here? Don't worry, I won't misunderstand. The principal patted him on the shoulder kindly. If I didn't know that you were Osiris Driver, why would I invite you to the Ivory Tower? I'm actually very pleased that you can inherit Mr. Orton's legacy. Although the vice principal has a big opinion of you, that guy has always been quite awkward. He shouldn't be trying to trip you up because of this, right? In the end, he hesitated, not daring to be sure. Huaisher was already numb. There was a lot of information in this old bastard's words, and he couldn't digest it at all. But while he was in a daze, the elevator had already gone down to the bottom floor. After passing through layers of strict defenses that Huaisher couldn't even detect, it went straight to the core of the Ivory Tower and slowly opened there. When Huaisher walked out and passed through the last door, he caught a glimpse of countless heavy books suspended in midair. It seemed that there was a tree of light spreading in the void. Those straight branches crisscrossed and formed a three-dimensional matrix in the huge underground square. When the layers of matrices intersected with each other, heavy books emerged at the nodes, formed and rotated slightly. They were all fragments of Kingdom of Heaven. Huaisher felt the Book of Destiny tremble violently. This was the vague outline of the fallen Kingdom of Heaven, a massive structure formed by thousands of fragments of Kingdom of Heaven. At the very core of the countless light matrices, there was a complex projection that was purely formed by the overlapping of countless images. Every moment, it revealed a different appearance. Amidst the flowing light and bubbles, the outline of a book was faintly outlined. Perhaps that was what the Book of Destiny should have looked like. Just by existing here, it seemed to control the operation of the whole world, shrouding everything in its own writing and records. In the almost suffocating spectacular scene, Huaisher couldn't help but sigh. It's really beautiful. Who says it isn't? The principal sighed softly. Unfortunately, it's a fake. Chapter 5:13. In an instant, there was a sudden dead silence. In the long silence, Huaisher finally realized what he had said. Immediately, he froze in place and fell into shock. He was really trying hard to be shocked, or at least to show that he was really shocked. But when he turned around, he saw a smiling face. He was behind him, staring at him, and beside him, there were countless beastly eyes. It was a terrifying scale that was incomparable to all the types and numbers of beasts that Huaisher knew. Countless beasts were hidden in the shadows, forming a tide that suddenly erupted and covered everything. And in the sea of tigers and wolves, in the mountains, and in the bushes, there was an old man in a black suit. His white hair reached his waist, and he held a cane in his hand. He was carefully studying Huaisher's appearance and smiling. "Why are you so surprised?" "Huaisher." The principal, who finally revealed his true appearance, asked softly, "Really, isn't it on you?" So hundreds of millions of beasts lowered their eyes and looked at Huaishur with all the ferocity in the world. Huaishur was shocked. This time, his shock was finally real. His mind was empty, and there was only a buzzing sound. As the biggest secret in his heart was revealed, his vision suddenly turned black, and he almost couldn't stand still. He couldn't breathe. He opened his mouth with difficulty and wanted to speak in the midst of the countless beasts, but countless thoughts emerged in his mind, mixed together with fear, panic, and shock, and it was a mess. He could only subconsciously ask in astonishment, "Old bastard, what are you talking about?" Just like that. After holding it in for a month, Huaishur finally called him an old bastard, even though it was at the most inappropriate time. But after calling him an old bastard, Huaishur felt incredibly refreshed and calmed down again. In the silence, the phantoms of countless beasts had disappeared at some point. Only the two of them looked at each other. The principal looked at Huaishur's face in confusion, as if he was uncertain. Did I make a mistake?" He stared blankly for a long time, then smiled embarrassedly. "Sorry, look at your pale face." Huaishur was silent for a long time. His face twitched, but in the end, he breathed a sigh of relief. "Don't make this kind of joke, principal. It will scare people to death." "No, I'm not going to open it." The principal smiled warmly again and patted his shoulder. "Let's put down the knife first." It was as if he saw the sacrificial knife silently appear in Huaishur's right hand behind his back. He scratched his white hair and asked curiously, "What's the matter? And why did you call me an old bastard?" "Huaishur." The principal was speechless. An awkward silence ensued again. After a long time, Huaishur coughed twice and asked, "Can we change the topic?" After a brief silence, the principal could not help but shake his head and tap his cane on the ground. In an instant, the sofa that had just been sent back to Huaishur's home returned here again, appearing behind Huaishur's, but it even brought the tea on the table along with it. "All right, sit down first, have a sip of tea, and talk slowly." The old man shook his head helplessly and sat down first. He picked up his teacup and took a sip. He could not help but sigh. "If you ask me, young people are so easily frightened. Back then, when the ideal country was in chaos, someone told me that half of the people had fallen into the abyss. I didn't even raise my eyebrows. The quality of this generation's guardians is really not very good." Even if he had already sat down, even if the principal had not suddenly strangled him to death, Huaishur was still extremely nervous. He did not know where he had exposed himself. He did not know where Crow had died to now, and why he had not taken him away. He could only try his best to stall for time. "How did you know?" The principal was still calm. He just glanced at him and shook his head. If before this, the only person in the world who knew that the Book of Destiny here was a fake couldn't guess the abnormality that happened to you, then there must be something wrong with this world. Huaishur was silent. "You guessed right. The Book of Destiny here is fake." The principal turned back and glanced at the illusory projection in the countless arrays behind him. He waved his hand slightly, and the outline disappeared without a trace. "A few decades ago, when the kingdom of heaven fell, I did not find the shadow of the Book of Destiny. From then on, I made a fake one and placed it here, telling everyone that the Book of Destiny was in the collection of the Ivory Tower and was very safe." He sighed softly. "From then on, I have been looking for the Book of Destiny." "Huaishur, how did you find me?" Huaishur asked. "It's not difficult. In fact, as long as you have the goal of where is the Book of Destiny, it's very simple and unexpected. It's like waiting for a rabbit to fall into a tree stump." The principal smiled and looked at the young man in front of him. "About a year ago, I felt the existence of the Book of Destiny for the first time. At that time, the feedback was very short, only for an instant." "A year ago." Huaishur frowned. That seemed to be the time when he had ascended. At that time, on that day, in those 2 hours, a total of 97,041 noteworthy things happened in the world. Among them was Green Sun's attack on Shinhai, and the person who awakened his soul was an unknown young man. The principal put down his teacup and stared at the young man in front of him with a serious expression. From that day onwards, your life became completely different, wasn't it? After a short silence, Huaisher shook his head and could not help but sigh. It was even earlier than that. This time, it was the principal who was stunned. He was silent for a long time. What's wrong? Huaisher did not understand. No, I just realized it now. On the sofa, the old man suddenly leaned back as if he was relieved. He scratched his white hair and finally confirmed this reality. So the Book of Destiny is really with you. The corners of Huaisher's eyes twitched crazily. He suppressed his anger and glared at him. So you were just tricking me before. Isn't that possible? The principal smiled proudly. I just want to try, Huaisher shut his mouth. He finally understood the gap between him and the old bastard in front of him. He did not intend to say anything after that. Let him be strong. I'm happy anyway. After all, Crow is still hiding in the basement. As long as he notices something is wrong, he can immediately bring me. Wait, don't tell me I was sold by her. Huaisher was shocked again, and his heart was cold. This black-hearted woman is finally going to harm me. Don't be afraid. This is the real core of the ivory tower. The principal seemed to have misunderstood something and comforted him. Whether it's the Directorate of Jurisdiction or the Continuation Academy, the Great Arcana cannot detect what happened here. He paused, and his expression became strange. In other words, no matter what happens, the outside will not know. So, Huaisher indifferently pulled out the sword of virtue, placed it on his knees, and straightened his body. Principal, do you think I will give up resisting? Give up, Huaisher. The old man shook his head. Without that gun, you have no chance of winning. Even if it's a deathbed struggle, it's still better than waiting for death, isn't it? Huaisher coldly retorted, Principal, bring it on. Let's see if I'll give up without a fight. Before I die, let me understand the difference between myself and a veteran Tier 5 sublimator, so that I can die with dignity. That's why it's really bad for young people to have the habit of fighting and killing. The principal sighed helplessly and raised his hand. The scepter in his hand turned into a fat cat that jumped into his arms and purred as he scratched it. I was hoping that we could be honest with each other after you came here. I'm already 112 years old, Huaisher. Among the survivors of the Utopia, the youngest who could survive until now is over 90 years old. For people like us, even if we obtain the Book of Destiny, what can we do? A devastated utopia, an empty paradise, a broken book that can't give me anything other than a meaningless identity? It chose you, Huaisher, so it's yours. Just like how we never wanted to take away Orton's legacy, you don't have to worry about what I will do to you. Otherwise, I wouldn't have brought you here. There are countless places in the ivory tower that are more suitable for killing and hiding corpses than here, and there are also countless excuses for your disappearance. Huaisher was amused. So, now that I'm lying on the chopping block and not killed, I should be grateful to you. Principal, you used 50 graduation certificates to force me here just to tell me this? Very well, Huaisher. I can feel that you are starting to be honest. The principal looked up and studied his cold face and could not help but smile. I'm starting to recognize the real you, just as you have seen the real me. Nice to meet you. Huaisher, he said. I'm the principal of the Ivory Tower, and I was once a scribe in paradise. Before paradise fell, I was one of the candidates for the Book of Destiny. The old man with waist-length white hair introduced himself and reached out his right hand to Huaisher. My name is Russell. Huaisher looked at his serious face in shock, and then looked at the hand in front of him. After hesitating for a long time, he reached out and shook it. Then he heard a snap. He felt his vision go black. It was as if he had touched a high-voltage electric switch. His body twitched on the sofa involuntarily. His hair was charred black by the electricity, and he could not move. After a long time, Huaisher finally reacted. He gasped in a daze and looked up at the old man with a nasty smile. You don't think I've forgotten that you called me an old bastard, do you? In front of him, Russell hugged the cat and glanced at him from the corner of his eyes. This is the first lesson I taught you as your teacher, kid. He paused for a moment and revealed a gloating smile. The leader lied to you when he said he wasn't angry. Chapter 514. Teacher, Huaisher's entire body went numb. He lifted his head from the sofa with difficulty and looked at the old ghost in front of him. When did you become my teacher? University is a place to seek knowledge, Huaisher. Time is short. Do you want to pass 4 years in vain? The principal grinned and looked at the young man on the sofa. Besides, as a former candidate for the Book of Destiny and a world-famous educator, is there anyone more suitable for this identity than me? As he spoke, his eyebrows raised slightly. I have a hunch that our 4 years will be very exciting. Exciting my ass. Huaisher was furious. Did you not learn Chinese well? I'm a substitute professor for advanced mathematics and history of philosophy, as well as an archaeologist. Do you want to see my degree certificate in Doomsday language? It is definitely better than a high school student. Huaisher could not help but sneer. What a coincidence. Do you want to see my 50 diplomas from world-famous universities? But there is no language in them, Russell reminded him. Huaisher was at a loss for words. Although he wanted to refute him and say that he was talking nonsense, when he thought about it carefully, it seemed that there really was no such thing. No need to think about it. There really isn't any. Luo Su whistled. I sent it to you. I'm very clear about it. So what are you trying to do? Huaisher was furious. Why are you talking so much nonsense? Are you going to kill me or torture me? Can't you be more straightforward? It's not that exaggerated. Russell waved his hand. After thinking for a while, he said seriously, I just feel that I should be responsible for you. Don't. We have no grudges in the past, and this is the first time we have met. Don't take responsibility for me. In his paralyzed state, Huaisher shook his head like a rattledrum. He was scared out of his wits. Whoever made this old bastard take responsibility would have 8 lifetimes of bad luck. It's fine if you don't want to. Russell held the cat and waved his hand generously. The ivory tower belongs to me alone. Young people, if you have any different opinions, you can also raise them. Do you think I will hold a grudge against you because you refuted my words? As he spoke, he lowered his head and looked at Huaisher, looking forward to his reply. Don't you want to? Huaisher rolled his eyes and completely ignored him. Since no one has any objections, this matter is settled. Therefore, after a fair and democratic resolution, Russell clapped his hands and finalized the resolution. Then, he put away the 6 machine guns that were about to poke Huaisher's head. She picked up the cat in her arms and threw it onto Huaisher. There was a loud bang. Huaisher was still unable to move. He felt as if someone had punched him in the stomach. His face instantly turned green. This cat, why was it so heavy? This old bastard wants to hurt me. This is a greeting gift from your teacher, Russell said with a smile. A greeting gift? Huaisher struggled for a moment and slightly propped himself up from the sofa. He looked at the fat cat in his arms and frowned. Just a cat? That's too stingy. You have to be more respectful when speaking to it. Russell shook his head and reminded him. It is very cold. If you anger it, it might give you some face. Before he finished speaking, he saw that the cat had already intimately laid in Huaisher's arms and was being caressed by Huaisher. It shook its little head and rubbed against his hand. After getting up and licking his face, it happily stepped on Huaisher's stomach with its 2 paws. It meowed happily. Isn't this cute, obedient, and easy to rub? Huaisher raised the orange cat with both hands and looked down. It's a big girl. How is it cold? By the way, what did you say just now? Russell's expression suddenly became a little complicated. Recalling the tragic past of being scratched on his face several times, he had a lot of curses that he could not bring himself to say. Huaisher stroked the cat and finally felt a little better. What's its name? War and Peace. What? That's right. War and Peace. Russell sighed. Before the Republic was divided, there were many things that were unwilling to be left out. For example, records would choose the members of celestial genealogy they liked and sign a contract with them to become partners and companions. Just like Lord of the Flies and Orton, Gone with the Wind, and Lady Chatchel. Following Russell's words, the orange cat in Huaisher's hand turned into a broken book. Even the cover was incomplete, and the contents inside were blurry. Only half. Huaisher frowned. Yes, in the records excavated from the wreckage of the Kingdom of Heaven, it was the most pitiful one. It was not even 1/3 of what it is now, and it was on the verge of death. After so many years, it still has not recovered. Russell sighed. But now that it's out of danger, I hope it can return to its former state in your hands. The broken book turned back into the appearance of a fat cat. Its four paws clung to Huaishi's body as if it was afraid that Huaishir would leave it here. Huaishir felt helpless. Fine, it's just a cat. I already have such a big horse at home. Do I lack cat food? I hope you don't eat too much. Huaishir rubbed its head and did not object. Is there anything I need to pay attention to? Since it's only half a book, it's difficult to stabilize its nature. You have to remember this. It will change from time to time. The color in its normal state doesn't matter, but when it becomes a black cat, it's in a state of war. When it becomes a white cat, it's in a state of peace. However, this is actually a regular pattern. Russell exhorted. Usually on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, it's the code of war, with its own wide area offensive buff. On Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday, it's the peace treaty, which can apply a restorative halo to a group. What about Sunday? Huaishir asked. It's off on Sunday. Russell shrugged. You can't expect a cat to go to work every day, right? It's okay to have Sunday off. Huaishir looked at the fat cat in front of him and began to think, is this thing a little French? Okay, stop looking. Russell waved his hand. If you want to look at it at home. Huaishir was stunned for a long time. He scratched his head and was a little unconvinced. That's it. What else? Kill you? Russell seemed to be amused and glanced over. That's indeed the simplest way, and I used to want to kill you. Huaishir. That calm gaze made Huaishir's scalp tingle. He couldn't help but move back a little. However, Russell paused for a moment and shook his head self-deprecatingly. But it's useless even if I kill you, isn't it? Back when Utopia was still around, I worked hard to become its scribe from the age of 14. I even dreamed of that day coming. Even after Utopia fell, I never gave up on searching. But until now, it has never chosen me. He said, I've already lost. Since those glorious times have already passed, why should I cling on to that little bit of joy of the past and cling on to it shamelessly? If it were 40 years ago, I might have been able to consider how to rebuild Utopia, clean up the mess, and restore the past. But now I don't have that much energy. Even if I'm free, all I can think about every day is how to build the world's largest swimsuit park in the Ivory Tower. There will be hot girls in bikinis running under the sun 24 hours a day. When I die of old age on a beach chair, there will be many big-breasted female students wiping tears for the passing of their idol. How wonderful would that be? Why waste the last moments of your life after wasting your whole life on meaningless things? The old man turned his head and stared at Huaishir. He told him calmly, That's the problem you should face, isn't it? Huaishir was silent, unable to answer. To be fair, Huaishir himself knew how much of a mockery his existence was to Russell, and how much effort and pain had Russell put in for this in the past. However, the Utopia was ultimately destroyed. Just maintaining the continuation of the Ivory Tower had almost exhausted his entire life's time and effort. Even Huaishir himself felt that even if he used his entire life, he would not be able to clean up the mess and problems represented by the Book of Destiny, not to mention rebuilding that glorious Utopia. He could understand Russell's confusion. In the beginning, Huaishir had felt fear and dread because of the existence of the Book of Destiny. He could not wait to get rid of this dangerous and heavy mission. However, with his subsequent experiences, his way of thinking gradually changed. After countless cycles and trials in the myriad heavenly sphere, even though there were no detailed memories left, Huaishir gradually no longer resisted the meaning of the myriad heavenly sphere. Just after Russell exposed Huaishir's biggest secret, facing the owner of the Ivory Tower, this genuine veteran crown person, what he thought was not to hand over the Book of Destiny, but to fight to the death. It was only at that moment that he realized that the Book of Destiny had become an indispensable part of his life. It was difficult to part with it. Looks like you've understood something. Russell laughed softly. It's always good to have some understanding. I hope you can continue to have such determination in the future. Following his words, the leaving elevator opened behind Huaishir again. But Huaishir did not move. After hesitating for a moment, he suddenly asked, "Don't you want to see it?" For a moment, Russell's shoulders trembled slightly. The old man had his back to him and did not turn around in the end. "No," he said, "there's no need." With that, Russell raised his head and looked at the illusory projection in the sky. "I can see it here every day. There's nothing strange about it." "Did you see it today, why sure?" "Yes." Why sure nodded. "Very good. You should go, why sure." He waved his hand. "New teachers are not qualified to stay here for too long. I still want to see it for a while, so I won't send you off." Before leaving, Weisher looked back at the lonely figure under the complex matrix one last time and did not say anything. The elevator door closed. Chapter 5:15. When the elevator door closed, the illusion of a bird descended from the sky in the silent underground library. It was as fleeting as a dream. You shouldn't have scared him. Crow stepped on a random record in the matrix and looked down at Russell with a serious expression. "I persuaded him to accept your invitation, not to let you scare my contractor." After a long silence, Russell finally let out a long sigh and shrugged helplessly. "I didn't want to scare him. In fact, he scared me." He paused for a moment, raised his head, and asked, "Did he really pass the Wanxiang Heavenly Sphere's highest standard selection? Even higher than the highest standard?" Crow said, "Out of 60,000 tests, he passed 57,000, and 3,000 were judged as failures. It wasn't because he failed, but because he didn't want to sacrifice anyone other than himself." "Russell, you should understand what this kind of result means." "Unprecedented, right?" Russell sighed. "So, you have to understand my aging heart. Not everyone can be like you." "I can understand." Crow's tone did not soften. "But this is different from what we agreed on. If he was ordinary, no, if he had the slightest bit of impossibility, I would have gone with the flow and given up, turning a blind eye and a deaf ear. But since there is a way, I can't let him grow unchecked." Russell said, "I don't think my plan is too cruel. On the contrary, it's because you are too gentle with him, isn't it?" As he spoke, he raised his eyes and stared at the bird above the dome, his eyebrows raised. "This is something I didn't expect. I thought you would be more radical than me. Ha! I'm just a weak, helpless, and pitiful woman. Don't you think you misunderstand me a little too much?" "Maybe." Russell looked away indifferently. "I don't think my arrangement is wrong. Indeed, it's not a mistake. On the contrary, it's very appropriate. But you can't just ignore his thoughts." Crow said, "I hope that you can guide him as a teacher and not establish a relationship with him through coercion. My contractor isn't someone who likes to be obedient. Trust me, there will always be something unexpected waiting for you. I've already seen it." Recalling how war and peace me out like a cat in Huaisher's arms, Russell's expression became complicated. His talent might be more terrifying than I imagined. To be honest, I'm a little regretful. I keep feeling like I'm trying to raise a monster that can't be tamed. He paused for a moment, hesitated, and fell into deep thought. "Just in case, why don't we kill him?" "Ahaha, you can give it a try." Crow laughed. "Just kidding. Why can't people take a joke these days?" Russell helplessly shook his head and looked distressed. "Well, I'll seriously consider your suggestion. Don't worry about this. After all, I'm still an educator. I won't screw up a student." "So," Crow asked, "what are you going to do?" "Let me think." Russell pondered for a long time and said seriously, "Isn't that what Dongsha said? When the heavens are about to give a person a great responsibility, they must first torment their will." As he spoke, he noticed that Crow's expression became strange. "What's wrong?" "Ahem, to tell you the truth." Crow cleared his throat and announced loudly, "I've tried all of these." He looked proud, as if he was showing off something. "Persecuting contractors, I'm a professional." Silence always came suddenly. Russell looked at him in astonishment. After a long time, he still couldn't hide his shock. "Why are you so wicked?" Crow awkwardly looked away. After a long silence, Russell asked curiously, "Did it feel good?" "That's really—" Crow laughed, looked up at the ceiling, and didn't answer. Although her conscience was still aching, she had no choice but to admit it. It felt so good. The next day, Huaishir, who officially entered the teaching and research room for the first time and wanted to keep a low profile, received his first position adjustment notice in the ivory tower with 2 dark circles under his eyes after a sleepless night. The vice principal, who was still expressionless, immediately announced the change after the regular meeting began. Because Mr. Ramanujan, the former secretary of the principal's office, was appointed as the person in charge of the second phase of the Abyss campus, he will leave the school headquarters for a year-long business trip. So, before he comes back, the position of the secretary of the principal's office will be temporarily held by one of our lucky group members. So, can you guess who this person is? As soon as the vice principal finished the first half of the sentence, Huaishir closed his eyes in despair. Then, Huaishir, who had nothing to live for, welcomed the expected result under the cold eyes of the vice principal. It's you. Are you surprised? Are you surprised? In this way, in the applause, Huaishir became the secretary of the principal's office on the first day of entering the teaching and research room. And it was a male secretary. Such an opportunity was rare and precious. A newcomer, in a month, leaped to become the confidant of the principal, the confidant of the vice principal. Even if there was no change in the teaching position, who dared to look down on the person who drove for the leaders and poured tea for them? Professor Anton's hand was almost swollen by Huaishir's shoulder. With a look of relief, he felt that the young man didn't let him down. He said that he must work hard and set a new high. Huaishir could only remain numb throughout the entire process to prevent herself from crying when she thought of her tragic future. His eyes were red. He could only say that he was touched. It wasn't that he didn't think of running away, but he didn't expect that he would lose everything now. He could run away, but the house couldn't. Even if he smashed the door of the basement with a hammer and called the crow out, she would only use "isn't it good?" or "it's all good" to fool him. If she wasn't involved in this, Huaishir dared to dig out his eyeballs and let little 19 step on them. The world was so cold. Only the cat in his arms and the student in front of him had a little warmth. Huaishir couldn't help but sigh to the sky. In a moment of carelessness, his hand touched Yuan's head and rubbed it like the cat in his arms. When he reacted, he found that Yuan had completely fallen into a sluggish state. Only her forehead was very hot. It was about to crash. Sorry. In order to cover up his gaffe, Huaishir could only put the cat into Yuan's arms. After coughing twice, he told her to practice hard and quickly slipped away. He went straight to the principal's office. Huaishir wanted to see what the old bastard could come up with to torture him today. Even if he jumped out of the ivory tower today and fell to his death in the abyss, he would never bow down to the old bastard again. 10 minutes later, Huaishir came out of the office happily. Before he left, he didn't forget to turn back and bow to Russell gratefully with a simple and honest smile. Thank you, Principal, you're so nice. Whoever dared to oppose Principal Russell, he would smash that person's head. 10 minutes ago, Huaishir walked into Russell's office angrily. The first sentence he heard was, "Xiao Huai, I remember your young masterming, right?" Huaishir was about to sneer and ask him, "So what if I am?" when he saw the principal, who was focused on correcting documents, raise his head and say, "In that case, I'll lend you the school's dragon summoning flute." Before Huaishir could squeeze out a sneer, his face stiffened and his eyes widened in disbelief. What? The dragon summoning flute? Like an honest and kind elder, Russell took off his glasses and asked with a puzzled expression, "Have you never heard of it?" It was because he had heard of it that Huaishir was so scared that he was about to tremble. Although the dragon summoning flute was called a flute, it wasn't as small and exquisite as its name sounded. Instead, it was 4 or 5 stories tall and was buried deep in the academy's basement. It was almost connected to the ivory tower. In essence, it was a divine mark made up of a secret instrument and countless expensive instruments. It was said that once it was played, combined with the divine mark of the mourners and a large amount of origin substance offerings, it could summon a dragon blood legion from the abyss to serve the user. These creatures that inherited the abyssal dragon blood were all terrifying existences on the level of the crowned. Normally, they would roam the various hells alone. Only this ancient contract could make them willingly gather in one place and lower their heads to obey orders. This kind of thing that could be called a weapon of war had always been sealed in the deepest part of the academy. Although there were many rumors about it, there were not many people who could confirm the credibility of these jaw-dropping rumors. But other than its ability as a weapon of war, the dragon summoning flute itself was one of the top 6 abyssal spies in the entire realm. It was second only to the Hubble spies that the Astronomy Society had created at the very end of the border. At the same time, it also had all the authority of the abyssal spies of the Ivory Tower. It could send its own signal to any large group that had come into contact with the Ivory Tower and had signed a contract with it. Simply put, other than being able to summon a good big brother with a single button, it also had the world's largest abyssal spies and the world's best microphone function. If he could use its search function, Huaishir would be able to save a lot of time and find the most compatible abyssal race from the Ivory Tower's database and a sea of contracts. Then he would be able to overcome the greatest difficulty of creating something from nothing. At that time, as long as the other party was willing to respond, they would be able to discuss the recruitment conditions, contracts, and benefits. Huaishir would then be able to raise his own abyssal army from that day onwards. Isn't 1 hour a little too short? Russell wrote on the spot and raised his head to ask, "Is 2 hours enough?" "It's enough, it's enough." Huaishir held the letter and grinned from ear to ear. It was as if a little nigger who could only learn how to grow black fungus in the middle of the night in Equatorial Guinea had suddenly picked up a direct ticket to Europe. He saw a glorious future. Chapter 516. Name: Huaishir, male, 18 years old, the main lecturer in the classical music appreciation classroom of the Ivory Tower, also the supervisor of the Astronomical Society, the Prince of Paradise, the Calamity Musician, the Abyss Cooking Demon, the legendary Investigator. It was as if a great switch had been pressed. In front of the gate, the manager just asked a question, and then Huaishir grabbed his hand and talked for 5 minutes. After he finished speaking, he looked around and asked, "Is there any water?" "Drink some water and then continue." "Enough, enough." The manager interrupted him helplessly. "As long as the name is approved, there's no problem. You don't have to memorize your resume anymore. Traditional skills can't be forgotten." Huaishir wiped the saliva from the corner of his mouth and was quite reluctant. "I haven't said it so smoothly for a long time. Why don't we do it again?" The manager rolled his eyes, put away Huaishir's approval, and pointed to the gate behind him that was slowly opening. He signaled him to get out of here. Huaishir was in a rare good mood and decided not to argue with this rude behavior. He turned around and couldn't wait to walk into the huge facility. After layers of tight seals, there was an underground space as big as a football field. It was as if a bridge had been built over the bottomless abyss, leading straight to the center of the abyss. Below both sides was endless darkness. One could feel the whistling wind blowing from it. At the end of the bridge, there was only a narrow round platform, covered by layers of alchemy arrays. Just standing on the round platform, Huaishir's eyes were constantly filled with illusions. It was as if countless deep hells were coming at him from the front. After the camouflage was removed for a short time, countless flames appeared in his perception. Even if the entire miracle engraving had not been activated, Huaishir had already felt some kind of trance, as if he was rapidly expanding. In a literal sense, he was expanding. This was not an illusion. In the deepest part of his soul, the young master of life's stigmata, which was as quiet as the night, had begun to operate on its own. It could not wait to follow this feeling, to explore the abyss and welcome the arrival of the mandate of heaven. Huaishir gasped and felt dizzy. It was still a lack of control. The silence of the past was not because Huaishir was able to control it, but because there was nothing that could make this miracle come alive. At this moment, when it began to try to break free, Huaishir was unable to stop it. In the blink of an eye, countless phantoms walked out of his body and went their own way, almost filling up the entire bridge. Unlike in the past, the images of those afterimages had become different. They were no longer vague and simple silhouettes, but had become an extension of Huaishir's life. Huaishir was dressed in formal attire, as if he was about to perform. Huaishir was scratching his feet in pajamas. Huaishir was fully armed and ready to explore hell. Huaishir was holding a textbook and lecturing. The mighty tide had already covered the entire array of the dragon summoning flute, causing the manager in the control room to fall into a daze. This was because the young arbiter of life's origin substance had interfered with the internal workings of the matrix. It was like an overly excited, discordant sound, seizing the main axis of the melody. This was the first time in history. Sir Huaishir, please try to restrain your saint insignia. Otherwise, the activation of the matrix might be disrupted, and something unexpected might be summoned. A reminder came from the speakers in the ceiling. Huaishir did as he was told and breathed in deeply. After a long, long time, the wandering phantoms finally reluctantly returned to his body. However, there were still some deviations. Right now, it was as if he had dozens of phantoms stacked on top of each other, making him look exceptionally blurry. Every movement was like a performance by the thousand-hand Guanyin, filled with a strange aura. Under his efforts to restrain his saint insignia, the dragon summoning flute's activation finally returned to a safe threshold. A strange iron chair covered in cables fell from the ceiling in front of Huaishir's eyes. As he sat down, the origin substance began to flow smoothly through the massive matrix, as if it had become one with the matrix. Specks of light began to glow. He took a deep breath and closed his eyes. The resonance was about to begin. It was almost time to draw the card. He couldn't help but rub his hands together in excitement. The current Huaishir was basically using his saint insignia as a signal to broadcast indiscriminately into the abyss. In the middle of the night, he would suddenly use a loudspeaker in a plaza to broadcast a missing person's announcement or a recruitment announcement. He would definitely encounter some unexpected situations and unknown malicious intent. Perhaps something would target him because of this. But this was the most reassuring aspect of the dragon summoning flute. Right now, his soul was under the protection of the ivory tower. Unless some ruler of the infernal realm hated Huaishir to the bone and couldn't wait to lead an army to deal with him as soon as they heard his voice, Huaishir would be able to sit back and relax no matter what happened. However, there was one thing that he hadn't thought of. When his origin substance was broadcasted into the abyss through the dragon summoning flute, it was as if he had poked a hornet's nest and thrown a string of 800 beeps into a pigsty. At first, there was a short period of deathly silence that made one's hair stand on end. Immediately afterwards, countless deathly silent infernal realms suddenly began to boil with activity. Countless crimson eyes opened in the darkness, listening to the flute's sound from afar. For some reason, they wanted to go out and take a look. It wasn't good to stay at home. They had to go out and apply. For example, a newbie who had just joined a group and immediately received 999 plus messages. A secondhand laptop that he had bought for 80 RMB had hundreds of video windows pop up as soon as he opened QQ. Or a person who left at 7:30 a.m. just in time for Ijo's morning rush hour. If it weren't for the fact that he was more receptive to information than normal people and had the help of the Book of Destiny, Huaishir would have already exploded on the spot. Even so, Huaishir still began to foam at the mouth, and his vision began to darken. His soul was overloaded, and his saint insignia was about to go out of control. Countless voices rang out in his ears. "Little brother, can I add you as a friend? Sir, do you need any service? Hello, I am the son of Leviathan. I am currently stranded in the Middle East. I urgently need 100 portions of origin substance to return home. When I return home and inherit Leviathan's throne, I will make you my crown wearer. Damn you, Chuhai, get out here. Please turn off the free mic. Thank you. Hello, do you have time to learn more about our divine father and savior rancher? Hiring male PR with high salary. Daily salary." Amidst the ear-piercing alarm, Huaishir opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of blood. He subconsciously raised his hand and pressed it against the Book of Destiny, writing down the first recruitment requirement. Remove all records of origin substances other than the resonance response, including those threatening species on the Ivory Tower's blacklist. If you're not applying, then crawl. In an instant, The noise was cut in half by the dragon summoning flutes array. Huaisha finally caught his breath, but he was still dizzy. He hurriedly wrote down the second requirement. Remove all abyss species that have already pledged loyalty to someone. The young arbiter of life's mandate was unique. If the target of their loyalty wasn't him, then no matter how powerful the abyss species were, he wouldn't be able to obtain any correction points. He might as well not have it. As Huaisha wrote down the second requirement, the countless noises paused for a moment, then decreased by more than half. Next, Huaisha wrote down the third requirement. Remove all abyss species that have already formed a large scale. If it was a species that was large enough to have a leader, then there was no value in nurturing them. What Huaisha needed wasn't a single step, but a process of starting from nothing. The noisy and chaotic messages began to decrease rapidly once more. The fourth requirement: remove all responses that contain conditions for a blood sacrifice. This time, thousands of them were cut down. Huaisha's consciousness gradually returned to normal, but he still didn't know where to start when faced with the complicated resonance. What was left behind was still an incomparably large number, but this time, the young arbiter of life's divine mark began to operate on its own. The miracle hidden in the depths of Huaisha's soul connected to the Book of Destiny and took over the dragon summoning flutes array. Then, at least 3/4 of the responses were blocked. Obviously, under the young arbiter of life senses, these were all abyss species that didn't have development potential or had no correction points to earn. This time, there were only about 400 left. Huaisha raised his eyes and glanced at the time. Half an hour had passed, so there was still 1.5 hours for him to choose. But in reality, the sooner the better. Every minute and second the dragon summoning flute was activated, it consumed a large amount of source crystals. In just half an hour, it had already burned through at least 60 million USD. He pondered for a moment and began to think about his needs for the abyss species. Soon, he sorted out his thoughts. First of all, they shouldn't look strange. Otherwise, if they summoned a group of tentacle monsters or some other unknown thing, he wouldn't be able to handle it. Then, they shouldn't be too troublesome or ask for too much. Otherwise, would he be a leader or a grandson? Finally, since he didn't plan to make a one-time deal, the more they hit it off, the better. Just as he formed his thoughts, in the huge array in front of him, a burst of light surged. There was actually an abyss species that completely met the requirements and couldn't wait to respond to his summons. As the light dissipated, a pair of icy blue eyes appeared from the darkness. The classic black and white color scheme, as well as the devilish smile at the corner of its mouth, gave off a domineering aura. After opening its mouth and howling at Huaisha, the abyss species that looked like a sled dog walked briskly to the edge of the round platform. It lowered its head and sniffed around. Then in front of Huaisha lifted one of its hind legs. Beep. Huaisha expressionlessly pressed the button in front of him and returned to the abyss. Goodbye. He really had enough of this stupid thing. Anything was fine, even if it was a group of green-skinned goblins, but definitely not a dog. Thus, with a burst of light, a green-skinned goblin with only a rag around its crotch jumped out of the summoning array. Beep. Huaisha pressed the button again. He changed his mind, not even a goblin. Then, the light lit up again, and a tempting and hot silhouette slowly emerged from it. A high-heeled shoe stepped on the altar, accompanied by an ecstatic moan. A young lady whose 3 measurements were hot to the point of exploding and who was wearing bikinis walked out of the summoning array. She raised her charming and sweet face and looked at Huaisha's appearance. Her cheeks flushed with excitement. She opened her mouth and licked her lips, but before she could speak, beep. Huaisha expressionlessly pressed the button and returned. Not only was his heart unmoved, he even wanted to laugh. Stinky sister, who are you trying to flirt with? Do you really think this is a brothel? Crawl for me. The light lit up again. Mortal, who is calling for the great. Beep. Honorable sir, I am an Abyss Idol trainee. Good at singing. Beep. You are my F*** king. Beep. You beep. This time, Huaisha was too used to pressing the button. He didn't even get to see the person's face clearly before he was sent away. Just as he was regretting, the light lit up again from the summoning array. Cat Paradise, Honest Management, now urgently hiring. F***CK. Why is it you again? The familiar figure in the puppet costume saw Huaishur as if he had seen a ghost. Without waiting for Huaishur's reaction, he directly walked up and slapped the return button. He ran away, and he ran even faster than before. Huaishur didn't even have time to curse. They had worked together for so long. Not only did he not help, but he also ran away so fast, he really didn't have any conscience. He could only rage helplessly. After continuously encountering such a bunch of unreliable people, he had already despaired of the promotion channel for the dragon summoning flute. Was there really no normal abyss tribe that came to apply? When Huaishur started to doubt life, the summoning array lit up again. It's the end of the month. Please vote. Chapter 517. As the light of the miraculous engraving lit up, a burst of impassioned drumbeats came from inside. Then, a huge laser ball rose from the light, refracting colorful rays of light. It illuminated the figures of 16 bearded dwarfs wearing only tight leather pants. Their upper bodies were naked, as if they were covered in oil, reflecting the strange light. The short, muscular abyssal midgets jumped to their feet amidst the passionate music and sang in unison, "Hey, young man." Huaishur closed his eyes in despair. Out of respect for the orchard gym, he did not press the button immediately. Instead, he fumbled in his pocket for a long time and took out his gun. He raised the muzzle and pulled the hammer. He closed his eyes and fired randomly. He would kill as many as he could. After emptying an entire magazine, the dwarfs, who looked like they were about to be killed on the spot, hugged each other and shivered in fear. Seeing this, he wanted to shoot a few more times. Phew! In the silence, Beelzebub, who had not worked for a long time, could not help but moan happily. "Thank you, brother. I'm done." "You're not allowed to be done." Huaishur was infuriated. He wanted to cleanse this thing and the group of people in front of him. "Where are you from?" He stared at the strange dwarfs and found that a few of them looked familiar. He did not know where he had seen them before. "What do you want?" Among them, the muscular dwarf who was originally wearing a thin veil raised a sign while shivering. "How can we not sing at such a critical moment? The Abyss Choir is at your service." "Amazing. Why is it you again?" We're here for a job interview." The dwarfs hugged each other and shivered, pointed at by the gun that was emitting a deadly threat. They were so scared that they were about to cry. They hurriedly raised the letter of introduction from the Hell Music Association. "Mr. Paganini recommended us." The leading dwarf shrieked. "He also said that you'll definitely like this program, and told us to cater to your interests." "Cater to my interests?" Did the Hell Music Association have some misunderstanding about me? Huaishur scrutinized the pile of oily muscular dwarves in front of him and felt a headache coming on. "I beg you, can you not join in the fun?" Huaishur covered his face and waved his hand. "I just wanted to recruit a group of Pokemon. Why are you doing this to me?" Beep. Click the repatriate button. With a sliver of hope, Huaishur raised his eyes. Next. But this time, the light lasted for a long time, so long that it made people uneasy. Nothing came out of it. Only the faint sound of paper being torn could be heard. It was like the fear that reverberated in the spinal cord at midnight. It made one tremble with fear. Soon, the light disappeared, but nothing appeared. Only a few dozen pieces of red paper that had been torn to shreds fell out. They looked like torn bills, full of curses and anger. Someone seemed to be cursing under their breath. Immediately, as the ear-piercing alarm sounded, the defensive measures of the ivory tower were instantly activated. A burst of blazing light flashed, and then silence returned. There was still a faint smell of blood in the air. Only a dozen faint footprints remained on the ground, proving what had just happened. In the silence, Huaishur sucked in a breath of cold air. In the stuffy interior of the dragon summoning flute, he was so scared that his hands and feet turned cold. Could this world still be good? How could he not know what had happened? Just a moment ago, some indescribable, bizarre existence in hell had already set its sights on him. If not for the protection of the dragon summoning flute's miraculous carvings, he would have died a horrible death. No, death would have been easy. A large number of tragic cases were still in the library. How could he not be afraid? After this example, Huaishur woke up with a start. He regained his original vigilance. Even with the help of the dragon's summoning flute, he still had to face all kinds of strange things from hell. Even the archaeological team would sometimes fail miserably. At this time, no matter how cautious he was, it would never be too much. Being reliable is the most important thing. He sighed from the bottom of his heart. But in the countless hells that were full of strangeness and horror, where could he find a reliable race that he could cultivate without worry? Powerful species like sled dogs had enough destructive power, but they were difficult to tame and control. And strange women with coquettish appearances were too strange to be trusted at all. The good brothers of the kitten paradise were strong and powerful, and he knew everything about them. But the bastard kitten ran away faster than anyone else when he saw him, as if he had seen a ghost. He was afraid that the paradise's legal department would become extinct. Huaishur sighed. Just as he was about to start again, the Book of Destiny suddenly moved. It directly adjusted the order of the resonance in the miraculous carvings and placed an inconspicuous response signal at the back at the front. Then, the light of the summoning instrument lit up. This time, a weak squeaking sound came from inside. Huaishur's eyes widened. He only saw a little mouse that hadn't even fully grown out crawling out from inside. It squeaked at Huaishur as if it was whining and trying to please him. A mouse? Huaishur was stunned for a moment, and he was dumbfounded. He didn't understand what the Book of Destiny selection criteria was all about. But then he saw a sharp bird's beak poke out from the light, aimed at the little mouse's neck and pecked down cleanly. With a squeak, the mouse lay on the ground and didn't move. Then, the black giant bird that was even more exaggerated than a large dog walked out of the miraculous carvings, picked up the little mouse, squeaked twice, and ran towards Huaishur with its short legs very affectionately. It put the little mouse that was still breathing on the ground. It bowed to Huaishur. It jumped on the spot, as if it was giving a greeting gift. Squeak! The newcomer's blood-red eyes were exceptionally excited. It spread its dark wings towards Huaishur and let out a sharp cry. Seems a little familiar? Just as Huaishur was stunned, the giant crow that suddenly appeared seemed to be afraid that Huaishur would be polite to it. It picked up the little mouse, put it into Huaishur's arms, and rubbed it twice. It signaled Old Tai to eat it while it was hot. Huaishur's expression twitched, and he quickly waved his hand. No, there's no need for that. Seeing that Huaishur wasn't eating, the summoned crow was a little disappointed. It lowered its head and swallowed the little mouse in one gulp, then jumped on the spot twice and squeaked twice at Huaishur. I don't know what it's saying. Huaishur scratched his head and looked down at the unfamiliar bird. The more he looked at it, the more familiar it seemed. The crow squeaked twice again. When it noticed that Huaishur didn't understand what it was saying, it anxiously went around in circles. Soon, it shook its wings vigorously, and a green grass seed fell from the gaps of its feathers into Huaishur's hand. Picking up the grass seed, Huaishur pinched it and sniffed it. He instantly felt a familiar scent. This kind of special grass seed was rare even in hell. The only time he had an impression of it was in Yamatai Hell. Weno Park. Huaishur was stunned at first, and finally recalled the group of crows that covered the sky at Yamatai. That was when he first became enemies with the Lin family. This group of local brothers had enthusiastically led the way for him, navigating the way. Occasionally, Huaishur would reminisce about it. Who would have thought that there would be a day when they would meet again? So it's you guys. Huaishur reached out his hand to pick up the giant crow and looked at it in surprise. It's grown so big, I can't even recognize it. Seeing that Huaishur finally recognized it, the crow became excited again and turned back to the summoning device and squawked. Huaishur subconsciously felt that something was wrong. Then, along with countless shrill chirps, a dark torrent that blotted out the sky and covered the earth gushed out of the summoning device. It swallowed everything. In the short span of half a minute, when the fully armed manager abruptly pushed open the door to the dragon's summoning flute, as if he was about to face a great enemy, he saw that a dancing darkness had already covered the entire interior of the dragon summoning flute. In the darkness, Countless scarlet eyes turned back and stared at him. It was as if countless blood-red stars had risen in the night. Among the dancing red dots, only the young man, who was almost drowned, raised his head with difficulty. Carrying hundreds of excited crows, he squeezed out an awkward smile at the manager. "Sorry, the job fair is over," he said. "It's just that the number of jobs seems a little too much." Half an hour later, he sat in the principal's office in the school's main building, which was filled with crows. A total of 1,120. "You're really something." Russell looked down at the report on his phone, took off his glasses, and carefully looked at the student in front of him. "Which hell did you move their whole family from?" Actually, I didn't think that much." Huaisher waved his hand awkwardly. I just nodded just a little. "I didn't expect them to bring their whole families here." "Then you're in luck." Russell picked up the magnifying glass, walked to Huaisher's side, and carefully looked at the overly large crow on Huaisher's shoulder. He even stretched out his hand to pull open its wings, looking at the long white edge of the wings. "Especially this one. Its condition is quite good." He sighed. "It has evolved into a frigid winter crow. It seems that their tribe is really suitable for you." "Frigid winter what?" Huaisher was confused. "You don't know?" Russell glanced at him, stretched out his hand, picked up the glass of water on the desk, and poured it directly on the crow's wings. The crow immediately shook its wings unhappily and caught at Russell. If it weren't for Huaisher, it would have pecked out the old man's eyeballs. After the water in the glass flowed over the crow's body and fell to the ground, it quickly solidified, forming little white frost. The chill was pressing. Chapter 518. Do you see it? It's almost like winter is coming, right? Russell put down his cup and said, "In some hells, we've discovered a population of these crows. They need to live in a place full of negative origin substances for a dozen generations before they can mutate. Even though it looks like an ability to control ice, it's actually the negative origin substances in their bodies that are spontaneously interfering with the outside world. This isn't a skill, but rather a phenomenon. These crows are very close to death, and they're also born with a dense amount of negative origin substances, so they're often viewed as ominous. But for a young arbiter of life like you, they're the perfect subordinate race. What's even more surprising is that they like you so much. It looks like you have a very high reputation among them." As he spoke, Russell began to clap and sighed with relief. "Congratulations, Huaisher. You've drawn a very good card." Hearing Russell say this, Huaisher finally let out a sigh of relief. He could finally relax. Even if he felt that reliability was the most important thing and didn't care too much about individual quality, the young arbiter of life only had one chance to be a subordinate, so the higher the compatibility, the better. After his joy finally died down, Russell slowly nodded and took a sip of tea before asking, "Did you feel good?" "Great." Huaisher rubbed the giant crow in his arms and sighed with emotion. "I'm done." "That's good." The old turtle nodded. Immediately afterwards, he revealed an unsettling smile and magically pulled out a long bill from his pocket. "Then let's settle the bill." "What's this?" Huaisher was dumbfounded. "Settle the bill." Russell looked at him in confusion. "You're a new teacher. It's one thing to use the dragon summoning flute for nothing, but don't tell me you don't even plan on paying for the fuel. Wow, you're too heartless. You didn't say you wanted me to pay." Huaisher was furious. She pointed at the bill that was about to hit her in the face. "Also, I only used it for a little over an hour. It's fine if you charge me $130 million for the fuel, but what the hell is this additional $40 million? Old bastard, you tricked me again." Recently, the trade war between the demonic Gold Bank and the House of American Banks has been very fierce. The price of origin-form crystals has more than doubled. I'm giving you 2 times the original price. I can't be more considerate, okay? Russell picked his nose calmly. "Besides, what's wrong with additional fees? Could it be that there was no additional charge for summoning over 1,000 hellish hordes at once? Also, 1,000 crows made a mess inside. This is a super sophisticated facility. Okay, Huaisher, don't tell me you think you can just clean it up with a mop. $170 million. I'm already giving you a discount on account of our teacher-student relationship. At this point, Russell's heart ached. Teacher is so considerate of you. Everything is for you. But what about you? But you're calling me an old bastard. Is that so? Huaisher was a little uncertain. Of course it's like that. Russell's expression became serious. As the principal of the Ivory Tower, and as your teacher, would I be greedy for your 100 million yuan? To me, 100 or 200 million is nothing. But the vice principal said yesterday that you secretly used public funds to go to the border and gamble. Bullshit. Russell was furious. His expression became even more serious. How can you question your teacher's moral character? Do I look like the kind of person who misappropriates public funds and has a bad moral character? You do. Huaisher glanced at Russell's performance out of the corner of his eye. They're both old foxes. Who are you playing with? He definitely wouldn't give him the money. He didn't believe that Russell could kill him. Since you said it like that, teacher has no other choice. Russell sighed sincerely. Teacher will help you pay this 100 million yuan. Who told me to be your teacher? Really? Huaisher was instantly on guard. Of course it's true. Russell nodded sadly. But when I misappropriate public funds, I will forge your signature. At that time, if the vice principal wants to get rid of the traitors for the Ivory Tower, I can only destroy the righteousness. Wait, Huaisher widened his eyes in disbelief. How can you be so shameless? Hey, you're talking as if this is the first day you know. Russell sat in his boss chair and looked at Huaisher's appearance. He asked earnestly, Teacher has promoted your position, increased your salary, let you use the dragon summoning flute, let you use the hell card, let you use it. Don't tell me this crow doesn't smell good. In the silence, Huaisher turned back and looked at the huge crow in his arms. In front of that pair of small eyes, full of expectation, he really couldn't bear to say that it didn't smell good. Then, Russell asked in a trembling voice, Ask yourself honestly, don't I treat you well? Huaisher was still speechless. Although he often complained in his heart that the old bastard liked to tease him, in all fairness, Russell was really good to this traitor. Not only did he not kill him, but he also took him in as a student, promoted and trained him vigorously. He even used public funds for private purposes and let him borrow the dragon summoning flute to draw cards. Although now it seemed that this was a trap that Russell dug for him, he had already received benefits, so he couldn't just turn his back on him and deny it, right? Huaisher could only nod and sigh. So, you're going to persecute me again, right? I'm also very pleased that you can think so clearly. Russell's smile became like an old grandpa on a bucket, looking kind and harmless. He just took out a document from his desk drawer and slowly pushed it in front of him. His eyes were eager. He was full of expectations for the future of this young man. Everything had already been arranged clearly. In the end, Huaisher finally accepted the trouble that Russell threw at him, although it looked very troublesome no matter how he looked at it. But whether it was from the favor of the dragon summoning flute or from Russell's bill, Huaisher had no reason to refuse. Moreover, this was not Russell's private matter, but official business of the Ivory Tower. As a teacher of the Ivory Tower, if the teaching and research office was assigned, how could Huaisher not go? It was nothing more than a business trip. He could just treat it as a new activity after the long grass period of the game ended. It was not the first time that he was a tool. After living a peaceful life for half a year, Huaisher found that he began to look forward to an adventurous life. He felt that he was crazy, but even if he went on a business trip, it would be 3 days later. The most important thing now was how to settle down the more than 1,000 crows that he had summoned. This was really a large group of them. When they flew in the sky, they were black, and when they landed on the ground, they were also black. Moreover, they liked to go around and snatch people's food. Many students thought that the Ivory Tower was attacked by creatures. It wasn't until the school's emergency broadcast that they found out that teacher Huaisher was bored and wanted to walk the crows. Thanks to a certain black-hearted woman who often pretended to be Huaisher's pet and flew around, it didn't seem too sudden. But the problem was that there were too many of them. So many that Huaisher had a headache. They moved from the abyss with their families because of his recruitment notice. He couldn't keep a few and then send them back. As for Feng Shu's ability also had a limit. He was so old. How could Huaishir throw 1,000 crows to him a raise? That was simply heartless. Don't worry, this matter is easy to solve. A black-hearted woman with the appearance of a crow said, "Don't you have to sign the contract first? You might as well sign it all at once. It's only 1,000 or so. You can fit them all in a box." So convenient? In the basement, Huaishir looked at the complicated matrix in front of him and couldn't believe it. At this moment, more than 1,000 crows were densely packed and almost filled the huge basement. Huaishir had no place to stand at all. He couldn't even figure out which one was his black-hearted woman, until she transformed into a human form and appeared in front of Huaishir. Looking at the face that he hadn't seen for a long time, Huaishir was slightly shocked and inexplicably remembered the unfinished benefits last time. "Okay, come back to reality." She raised her hand and waved in front of Huaishir. Then, without waiting for him to react, she snapped her fingers. Above her head, the shadow of a crown flashed before disappearing. Following that, a waterfall of darkness gushed out from Huaishir's body, swallowing everything in its path. Involuntarily, in his hand, a burning banner appeared again, and in his other hand, the outline of the sword of virtue condensed. With the full power of the young master's stigmata, the gloomy and solemn bone-burying sanctuary descended into the basement. The noisy birds in the surroundings fell silent in an instant. Then, they spread their wings and gathered into a surging crow tide again, rushing into the darkness of the bone-burying sanctuary. The birds, who loved death, were also attracted by the pure silence. For them, they couldn't resist the attraction of the young master at all. Moreover, they didn't have any vigilance or suspicion toward Huaishir. Under the cover of the abyss miracle, a flame suddenly rose from the banner in the darkness of the bone-burying sanctuary and spread among the crows. It was the qualitative change of the origin substance caused by the young master. In the flames, the crows from hell were quickly disintegrating, turning into pure mist and merging into the bone-burying sanctuary, returning to nothingness. Soon, another light lit up again, and those fleeting silhouettes emerged from the darkness. They were completely different from the past. In a short period of time, they had undergone a long transformation and rebirth. At this moment, they had become the subordinates of the young master, the guardians of the bone-burying sanctuary, and also the Hell tribe directly under Huaishir. It could be said that they themselves were already an extension of the young master's stigmata. They were no longer as large and heavy as before. They returned to the size of ordinary birds. These crows that seemed to be condensed from mist had completely transformed into origin substance creatures, becoming extremely light. It felt like a living ghost. The negative origin substance of thousands of crows poured into the Nibelungen ring, causing a huge change that Huaishir did not expect. The 9 vacant ghost positions were instantly filled. Even the previously formed ghosts were dissolved and reborn. In the group of crows, there were 9 of them whose forms changed and became more and more solid. Unlike other crows that were similar to ghosts, they had truly obtained the stigmata of ghosts and became members of Huaishir's army. The compatibility between the miracle from hell and this group of crows was ridiculously high. There was no obstruction between them at all. It was unknown if it was the influence of Huaishir's soul, but layers of complicated silver-white patterns quickly appeared on the bodies and wings of the 9 crows. They looked like they had a metallic texture. In the mouths of the 9 crows, there were ancient and gorgeous candlesticks. On the candlesticks, a short candle was burning quietly. It emitted a faint light from the darkness. Those faint flames looked so unreal, like a dream bubble. No matter how turbulent and violent the hurricane was, it could not be extinguished. Candlesticks, Huaishir could not understand what was going on. But through these 9 candle crows, he could feel that the entire flock of crows was under his control. It was as if they were his arms, and their minds were connected. There was no inconvenience at all. The entire flock of crows had become an extension of Huaishir's army. With their replenishment, young Arbiter Ming's stigmata had completed another transformation. It seemed to have become more complete, and Huaishir felt a sense of joy from the bottom of his heart. With the power of the ivory tower, he had passed the most difficult hurdle so easily and easily. From now on, as long as Huaishur nurtured the flock of crows step by step and made them into a large flock of abyss, he would be able to obtain an endless stream of cultivation essences and help young Arbiter Ming grow rapidly. Huaishur had a thought. He took out the Book of Destiny and slapped it down on the 9 candle crows in the flock. Now that they were considered his own army, this move should work. But even Huaishur did not know what kind of record the Book of Destiny would produce. It could only depend on luck. Fortunately, after the Book of Destiny was slapped down, the crows were still crows. There were no strange changes. A few of the crows glared at Huaishur, then suddenly opened their mouths and cried out, "You're right." Holy! As if someone had pressed an incredible switch, the flock of crows instantly became restless. All the crows were restless. They stared at Huaishur and began to praise fervently. Holy! 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 Huaishur was so scared that his face turned green. Where the hell did this bunch of fanatics come from? No. Why are they repeating themselves like I bought a bunch of repeaters? That's all they can say. Are you guys possessed by lizardmen? By the time Huaishur calmed down the flock of crows, a few hours had already passed. His ears were constantly buzzing. In the middle of the night, if the basement's soundproofing was not good enough, the neighbors would have already come knocking on his door. Huaishur was not worried about whether he could win or not. But what if the crows thought he was an enemy and pecked him to death? He could only be in a panic. From beginning to end, a certain black-hearted woman was leaning on the side and watching him make a fool of himself. Until Huaishur was completely out of ideas, she picked up the birdcage that she had bought for herself in the antique shop and threw it over. Catch! Huaishur staggered when he caught the gorgeous birdcage. It looked light, but the actual weight of this thing was not inferior to solid steel. After opening the door of the birdcage, there was no sight of the birdcage. Instead, there was a burst of multicolored blurry light. It was like an entrance to a certain place. Huaishur did not have time to think too much. He just pointed at the birdcage. Without saying anything, the flock of crows that blotted out the sky soared into the sky, turned into a gray storm, and drilled into the birdcage. They had all drilled into it. When the last crow flew in, the door of the birdcage closed on its own. A white fog rose from the empty birdcage. When the fog dissipated, a lifelike crow could be seen jumping around inside. He could also see a small mountain peak, a forest, and a graveyard below. Huaishur held onto the handle of the birdcage. He could sense the changes in the crow's condition inside. They did not feel cramped or uncomfortable inside. Instead, they quickly adapted to this new place and began to happily sing a new round of hymns in unison. What is this? Huaishur held onto the birdcage, turning it over and over as he looked at it, feeling incredibly curious. In the past, he had never noticed that he had such a strange thing in his house. The Cage of Dreams. The black-hearted woman, who had seen enough of the commotion, said, "It's something made from the leftovers of rotten dreams. You can use it as a supersized pokeball. It should be able to hold these weightless origin substances. It'll make it easier for you to get a good night's sleep in the future." It was as if she could hear those crows singing hymns all the time. Her smile became even stranger. "I didn't know that you liked crows that much." She suddenly leaned in closer and looked closely at Huaishur's face. She smiled slightly. "Do you have some unspeakable thoughts about me? Is that why you want to find a few crows to rub and hug?" I don't. Don't talk nonsense." Huaishur jumped in fright. His eyes widened. "How can you accuse me of something I'm innocent of?" "Oh, is that so?" Her slender eyebrows jumped slightly as she sighed regretfully. "Then I must have misunderstood. Seeing how hesitant you looked, I thought that you wanted to continue the benefits from last time." "How regretful. What the hell are you regretting?" Huaishur was angry. "If I really want your benefits, I might as well hold a chisel and take a few bites." Therefore, the woman's smile became more and more cheerful. This made Huaishur unhappy. He wanted to beat her, but after staring at her for a long time, he couldn't do it. He could only shake his head and sigh helplessly. Huaishur raised the cage in his hand and asked, "Haven't you found the problem, Holy?" "Not this." Huaisher scratched his head and became a little irritated. Haven't you found that the character settings are overlapping? No, what I mean is, now that so many crows have suddenly appeared, I won't know how to distinguish them in the future. No, what I mean is, after knowing each other for so long, I can't still call you hey, 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 right? That makes sense. The woman nodded thoughtfully. Then she suggested, why don't you call me crow number 1, and then number 2, 3, for from below? Isn't that good? Not good at all. Huaisher didn't get angry. He didn't even glare. He just stared at the woman in front of him seriously. I'm not asking you how to distinguish so many crows in the future. I'm asking for your name. Huaisher looked at her. Finally, he plucked up his courage and asked seriously, tell me your name. In the silence, the woman in front of Huaisher seemed to be stunned. She raised her eyebrows and looked at the young man in front of her as if she had met Huaisher for the first time. She couldn't help but chuckle softly. But she didn't speak. After a long wait, Huaisher finally retreated. He sighed, waved his hand, and turned to leave. But before he left, he heard a soft voice like an illusion coming from behind him. Tongi. He turned around in shock and froze on the spot, because she was standing behind Huaisher, so close that he could almost feel her breath on his face. Huaisher subconsciously took a step back, but she moved forward again, pressing forward step by step. She reached out and almost pushed Huaisher against the wall. When she lowered her head to look at his lifeless face, she revealed a mischievous smile. In the silence, Huaisher could only hear his chaotic heartbeat. He couldn't help holding his breath. He asked dryly, what are you talking about? Didn't you just ask a question? I'm answering you. The woman was still smiling. She raised her hand and tucked her long hair behind her ear. Then that magnificent and beautiful face moved closer inch by inch. She whispered in his ear, don't forget, Huaisher. She said, my name is Tongi. This was her self-introduction. After a year, she came late. Huaisher. He didn't sleep all night. In case you can't see the author's chapter, I want monthly votes. Chapter 519. Tongi. Tong, GG. For the entire night, Huaisher disassembled the two words and put them together, flipping them upside down. He used more than 10 search software and searched hundreds of pages. In the end, he didn't find anything useful. When the next day's sunlight shone through the window and landed on the two dark circles under his eyes, Huaisher laid on the bed and stared blankly at the ceiling. He began to think, is this woman trying to trick me again? But when he thought about how she didn't cheat him of any money last night, and how she didn't take the opportunity to take away anything at home, even his virginity was still intact, and she didn't take the opportunity to sully it. Thinking of this, Huaisher couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. Fortunately, he wasn't careless. Otherwise, wouldn't he have lost everything? As his mind wandered, he got up and took a shower. After washing up, he ate breakfast and began to prepare for today's lesson for the students. But when he mentioned the Cage of Dreams, he was stunned. The number had changed. Previously, there were 1132 of them, but now there were 1156 of them. There were an additional 34. After all, Decaying Dream had once been the ruler of this world. After Tongji had processed the parts of his remains, this dream cage had become an incredible relic of the border. Countless dreams overlapped within it, faintly forming a hell between existence and nothingness. It seemed to be connected to some other place. If it was in the hands of a stigmata like the Nightmare Lord, it would probably become a powerful weapon. But even if it was only used as a birdcage, the effect was still amazing. In just one night, the number of crows had increased by a lot. But if he wanted to go one step further and form a new scale, he would have to rely on the help of young Arbiter of Destiny. Now, they already looked like a large flock from hell. But for some reason, they still couldn't form a truly large flock. Perhaps they were still lacking some opportunities and growth. It seemed that staying at home and doing nothing, waiting for them to grow on their own, wasn't too realistic. But at least there was a path. It was better than when he had nothing and slapped his head thinking about where to go to get some. Then, from today onwards, he would work hard to become a master of magical animals. He sighed. Hopefully, the process would be simpler. At 8 o'clock in the morning, Huaisher's doorbell rang punctually. Lin Shurgio, who was still yawning, and Yuan, who was carrying Shan Jun's heavy sword and violin, had already arrived at the door. After greeting Feng Shu, the two entered Huaisher's study to prepare for today's class. Compared with Yuan, who had made rapid progress recently, Lin Shurgio was getting more and more lazy. He looked like a bored student that could be seen everywhere, which was very consistent with his usual harmless disguise. Huaisher would have thought that this guy had turned over a new leaf if he hadn't heard that the friction between the clubs he was close to had become more and more intense. The fact that no one had grabbed his handle meant that his ability to stir up trouble was getting better and better. After tricking someone, he was even given a silk banner as a thank you. She acted like an obedient child in Huaisher's place, but who knew how wild she would be when she went out. After checking Lin Shurgio's homework, Huaisher shook his head helplessly. It wasn't that he did something wrong or bad. No matter how bad Lin Shurgio was, he wouldn't play any tricks in his teacher's class. The homework was done quite well. There are no traces of plagiarism, and it didn't seem like he forced others to write it for him. When Huaisher occasionally asked questions, he could also answer fluently. In the skills taught by Huaisher, although he wasn't very good at it, he could still see that he practiced hard. But that was it. Excellent was excellent, qualified was qualified, but no matter how he looked at it, he felt that this guy should be more than just excellent and qualified. After thinking about it, this was Huaisher's own fault. He didn't teach him the right things and places. But as a teacher, there was no reason to teach a student bad things, right? Huaisher closed the homework and looked at the serious little Shurgio in front of him. His expression became serious. Have you been too idle recently? No. Lin Shurgio opened his eyes wide and answered sincerely. Under your guidance, I've been living a fulfilling life every day. It was quite fulfilling. Every day, he stirred up trouble and spread the seeds of disharmony among the students. The school affairs office of the Ivory Tower was overloaded with work recently. This week, 3 students were expelled. As for confinement and self-reflection, there were simply too many to count. Thinking of this, Huaisher couldn't help but suggest, "Teacher also needs you to praise me. But when you go out in the future, can you not say that it was me who taught you?" He always felt that he would be demonized very badly when the time came. But there was no other way. It was his fault for not teaching him well. Moreover, on the path of evil, it was already good not to commit murder and arson. Did he have to force people to do good deeds every day? He shook his head and waved his hand, indicating for Lin Shurgio to come closer. Looking at his serious look, Lin Shurgio suddenly felt a little nervous. Could it be that the rumor between the Rose Society and the Four Flower Squad was exposed? Or did the few students who had something on him come to report him to the other students? No, they shouldn't have the guts. Could it be that the teacher found out that he was too timing? It shouldn't be. The teacher himself seemed to be stepping on an entire fleet. He shouldn't care about these things. Could it be? Lin Shurgio's mind raced, and he instantly understood the reason. With a thump, he lay on the ground and shouted, "Teacher, I was wrong." Huaisher was stunned and confused. What the hell? What happened? Why are you lying on the ground again? He raised his eyebrows and looked at Lin Shurgio, who was lying on the ground nervously. He sighed. Picking up the teacup, he asked earnestly, "Tell me, what did you do wrong?" Lin Shurgio subconsciously looked behind him and closed his eyes. There are public classes these few weeks. I shouldn't have urged Yuan to pretend to be sick and skip classes with me. Crack! Yuan, who was behind him, almost crushed the teacup. She slowly raised her head and her expression became gloomy. Zhao skipped classes again. Yes, he skipped classes for a total of 4 times. He even forged a signature from the school doctor's office to participate in DP39. Lin Shurgio quickly betrayed his teammate. I admit, I have my reasons, but I only started it. He did the rest. He is a self-taught genius. Looking at Yuan gradually calming down, Huaisher began to mourn for his little brother in his heart. What the hell is going on? But what is DP39? He asked curiously. The 39th Abyss Fourth Dimension Game Animation Exhibition. Lin Shurjo whispered. In addition to buying plastic figurines, Yuan Zhao also went up to receive several awards. It seems that he is very popular. It doesn't matter if he has some hobbies. Huaishir took out her phone and did a search. Yep, she immediately found a photo of the original character smiling brightly with all sorts of revealing young ladies. He was even holding up a plastic doll. Looking at Yuan's increasingly scary smile, he felt that this young man was doomed. Forget it. I don't want to get involved in the Yuan family's business. He rationally looked away, glared at Lin Shurjo, and shook his head. Who told you this? Then, is it about me secretly helping the president of the student union to collect bribes? Huaishir's face twitched. Is it about me secretly writing an anonymous letter to report the unfair competition in the dance club? Lin Shurjo panicked. It can't be about the fall of the school's deputy director, right? Okay, don't say any more. Huaishir couldn't help but want to pinch his mouth. Little brother, isn't your life a little too rich and colorful? If you continue like this, even the teacher can't protect you. His heart couldn't take it anymore. Why can't one or two people let me be at ease? Isn't it better to learn more from Yuan? He waved his hand, suppressed the urge to beat him, and glared at Lin Shurjo. I think you have nothing better to do, so I have to find something for you to do. Come here, take this, from today onwards, carry it for me. He picked up the cage of dreams beside the table and handed it to Lin Shurjo. Lin Shurjo reached out to take it and suddenly staggered, almost falling to the ground. Unlike Huaishir's relaxed expression, he was on the verge of being crushed by this terrifying power. The moment he touched it, he felt as if a heavy truck had been stuffed into his hands. His divine mark was trembling because of the pressure that came purely from the nature of his body. Was this some kind of punishment from the teacher? Lin Shurjo opened his mouth to beg for mercy, but then his expression changed. It was as if his blood had been congested, and his eyes emitted bursts of purple-red light. Oh! The berserk negative origin substance poured into his body, causing the snake transformation divine mark to hiss excitedly. A pitch-black cloud formed above his head, and one could faintly see the hidden lightning within. His hair was standing on end, and his entire body seemed to be on drugs, shrouded in a faint flame. He had become stronger. It was as if he was holding a negative energy nuclear power plant in his hand, and an endless stream of pure negative origin substance was being emitted from it. It was so dense that it seemed to form an ocean, and his entire body was submerged within. This was the first time in Lin Shurjo's life apart from the abyssal mirror that he had experienced this kind of carefree feeling. Even though it was painful, it was also incomparably joyful. His expression constantly changed, alternating between excitement and fear. It was incredibly strange. The snake transformation sacred mark, which had been dormant for a long time, actually began to show signs of growth under the stimulation of the cage of dreams. Lin Shurjo danced with joy when he felt his teacher's care. As he raised the cage of dreams, he couldn't help but turn around to look at Yuan. He was filled with pride. Can you do it? Yuan's expression was confused. She couldn't understand what he was thinking. Enough. Huaishir patted the back of Lin Shurjo's head. 10 minutes a day is your limit. Don't try to communicate with it too often during the rest of the time. Be careful not to have nightmares. Yes, he would dream of being surrounded by thousands of crows singing hymns or something. What if he got brainwashed by them? Huaishir didn't want to have a little psychic following him around and calling him holy every day. All right, I'm going on a business trip. When you two go back, pack your bags and come with me. After the class ended, Huaishir put away his book, thought for a moment, and seriously suggested, this is a rare opportunity to practice. Don't miss it. Seeing that Lin Shurjo and Yuan didn't seem to understand, Huaishir revealed the same kind smile as Russell. It was good to be young. He took a sip of tea and sincerely felt the joy of persecuting others. It felt so good. On the first day of the month, please guarantee the monthly votes. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.